The briefing room went quiet when she walked in. Sergeant Maya Chun carried a tactical pack and wore standard Marine combat utilities, her dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. The Navy SEALs gathered around the situation, map barely glanced her way. Most assumed she was intel. Maybe communications. Definitely support. Lieutenant Commander Jack Reeves stood at the head of the table. Satellite imagery spread before him like a puzzle waiting to be solved. 8 SEALs occupied chairs or leaned against walls, their relaxed postures masking the coiled readiness that defined their profession. When Chun entered, a muscular operator with a thick beard gestured toward an empty seat near the communications gear. She nodded her thanks, but remained standing near the back wall. The gesture was noted and quickly forgotten as Reeves began the brief. The target compound sat in a valley 12 kilometers from the Pakistani border. High-value individual, confirmed presence, narrow window for extraction. Standard direct action mission with one critical requirement: precision overwatch from elevated positions. The enemy had learned to expect American raiders. They would be ready. Reeves traced the infiltration route with a laser pointer. His voice carried the calm authority of a man who had run these missions dozens of times. The team would insert via helicopter at a landing zone 3 clicks north. Move through mountainous terrain under darkness. Establish overwatch positions before dawn. Neutralize the target during a scheduled meeting at 0600. Petty Officer First Class Mike Torres, the team's primary sniper, leaned forward to study the topography. His call sign was Eagle Eye, earned through 3 deployments and 47 confirmed kills. He pointed to a ridgeline overlooking the compound. "That is my position," Torres said. "Clear line of sight, 800 meters, minimal wind interference at that hour." Reeves nodded. Chun watched Torres with quiet attention, her eyes tracking his finger across the map with an intensity that suggested more than casual interest. But nobody noticed. She had learned long ago that being underestimated was often an advantage. The bearded SEAL who had gestured to the communications chair spoke up. His name was Danny Ortiz, a breacher whose job involved explosives and forced entry. He asked about secondary exfiltration routes if the primary was compromised. Reeves outlined the contingencies while Chun remained motionless against the wall. Her breathing was controlled, her posture relaxed but centered. Anyone with training in body language might have recognized the stillness of someone comfortable with violence. But these men were focused on the mission, not on analyzing the woman they assumed was there to carry extra batteries and relay messages. "Before we continue," Reeves said, shifting his attention briefly to the rest of the team, "I want to make sure everyone understands the support element. Chun is attached to this operation under JSOC directive. Her presence is need to know. Her background is classified, and her role will be clarified as necessary." A few SEALs exchanged glances. Classified support usually meant intelligence analysts or specialized technical personnel. Chun's slight build and quiet demeanor did nothing to challenge that assumption. She offered no explanation, and Reeves provided none. The brief continued. Exfiltration timing, air support windows, rules of engagement, medical contingencies. Each SEAL absorbed the information with professional focus, their questions precise and tactical. Chun listened without interrupting, her dark eyes moving from the map to the faces around her, cataloging everything. Torres stood and walked to the terrain model someone had constructed on a side table. The miniature valley showed elevation changes, structures, probable guard positions. He traced his planned shots, talking through wind calls and range estimation with the casual fluency of a master craftsman discussing his trade. Chun stepped slightly closer, her movements so subtle that only Reeves noticed. The lieutenant commander caught her eye and gave the smallest nod. She settled back against the wall. "Final equipment check is at 2200, Reeves announced. "Wheels up at 2330. We insert at 0100 local time. Any questions?" Ortiz raised a hand. "Does Chun need any special accommodation for gear or positioning during insert?" The question was asked without condescension, purely practical. Chun spoke for the first time since entering the room, her voice quiet but clear. "Standard combat load," she said. "I will position wherever the team needs me." Her accent was neutral American, her tone professional. Nothing remarkable, nothing that suggested anything beyond basic military competence. Ortiz nodded and returned his attention to the map. The briefing broke up 20 minutes later. SEALs filed out, discussing sectors and timing, their camaraderie evident in the shorthand of men who had trained together for years. Chun gathered her pack and turned toward the door. Reeve called her name. She paused. When the room was empty, the lieutenant commander crossed to where she stood. His voice dropped to a tone meant only for her. "They do not know," he said. Chin's expression remained neutral. "That is intentional, sir." Reeves studied her for a moment. In 3 years of working with Joint Special Operations Command, he had seen Maya Chin's classified file exactly once. The details were limited, but the summary was clear. Marine Scout Sniper School honor graduate, advanced special operations training, multiple deployments to classified theaters, operational designation that made her assignment to his team both logical and surprising. "If Torres goes down," Reeves said, "we need you ready." Chin met his eyes without hesitation. "I'm always ready, sir." The confidence in her voice was not arrogance. It was the simple statement of someone who knew exactly what they were capable of and felt no need to prove it before the moment required. Reeves recognized that quality because he had built his career on the same foundation. "Before you arrived, did anyone in your command ask questions about your role here?" Reeves wanted to know. "They were told I am augmenting your intelligence package," Chin replied. Nobody questioned it. Reeves almost smiled. The assumption had worked perfectly. A female Marine attached to a SEAL team would naturally be slotted into support categories by default, not through malice or even conscious sexism, but through the simple pattern recognition that guided quick assessments in high-speed operations. Chin had not fought the assumption because fighting it would have drawn attention she did not want. "Get some rest," Reeves said. "Tomorrow might get complicated." Chin nodded and left the briefing room. The hallway outside was empty, fluorescent lights humming overhead in the deployed base that served as staging for a dozen teams running missions across the region. She walked with the easy gait of someone comfortable in combat boots, her pack riding naturally on shoulders that had carried such loads across mountains and deserts for years. Before we continue with this story, drop a comment and let us know what state you are watching from. Maybe you have witnessed similar displays of hidden capability in your area. In her assigned quarters, Chun laid out her equipment with methodical precision. Body armor, ammunition pouches, medical kit, communications gear, and wrapped in a weatherproof case at the bottom of her pack, the tool that defined her actual purpose on this mission. The rifle was a custom-built precision weapon, chambered in .308 Winchester, topped with optics that cost more than most cars. Chun assembled it without looking, her hands moving through the familiar ritual of checking every component. Bullet, trigger assembly, scope mounts. Every piece had been zeroed to her exact specifications. Every adjustment calibrated through thousands of rounds fired in conditions ranging from Arctic cold to desert heat. She did not think about the SEALs and their assumptions. That would resolve itself when circumstances demanded. Instead, she thought about wind patterns at dawn in mountainous terrain, about the way temperature shifts affected ballistics at extended range, about the 100 variables that separated good shots from perfect shots. Maya Chun had learned her craft from instructors who believed that sniping was not about pulling triggers, but about controlling chaos through perfect preparation. She had learned that the weapon was only as good as the mind behind it, and she had learned that reputation meant nothing compared to results. Her call sign was known in certain circles, spoken with the kind of respect reserved for operators who delivered when everything else failed. But tomorrow, the SEALs would learn it for the first time. And they would learn it because someone was about to go down, and someone else was about to step up in ways none of them expected. Chin finished her equipment check and sat on a rack, rifle case across her knees. Outside, the base hummed with activity. Helicopters spooled up for other missions. Trucks moved supplies. Young Marines and soldiers went about the business of supporting the war machine that never slept. She closed her eyes and visualized the terrain. The ridgeline, The compound, the distances and angles. In her mind, she ran through the shots Torres would take, then through the shots she might need to take if his position was compromised. She thought through contingencies and backup plans, building the mental architecture that would support split-second decisions when bullets started flying. Nobody knew that Maya Chun had spent 6 months in a classified role supporting Delta Force operations. Nobody knew about the nights she had held impossible angles while assault teams moved through structures below. Nobody knew that her longest confirmed kill was just over 1,400 meters, a shot taken in conditions that should have made success impossible. Tomorrow they would learn part of that truth. Not all of it, never all of it, but enough to understand that the woman they had dismissed as support staff was something else entirely. Chin opened her eyes and began her pre-mission ritual, the same sequence she had followed before every operation since her first combat deployment. Equipment staged. Mental visualization complete. Now came the hardest part, waiting for tomorrow to arrive and prove once again that underestimation was a gift she had learned to accept with quiet grace. The armory at 2200 was controlled chaos. 8 SEALs moved through weapons checks with the efficiency of men who could field strip their rifles blindfolded. Chun arrived early and claimed a corner workstation, laying out her gear in precise rows that spoke to training most of these operators would never see. Torres was already there, his sniper rifle partially disassembled on a mat. He glanced up when Chun set down her pack, offering a brief nod that acknowledged her presence without particular interest. She returned the gesture and began her own inspection routine. The rifle case opened with quiet clicks. Chun lifted the weapon free and began function checks that had become muscle memory. Bullet cycling, trigger reset, scope adjustments. Her movements were economical, practiced, but she kept the work subtle. Just another support person checking equipment. Nothing to see here. Ortiz wandered over, his own carbine slung across his chest. He watched Chun work for a moment before speaking. "You handle that pretty well," he observed. She did not look up from examining her scope rings. "Marine Corps qualification standards," she replied. "Everyone learns basic marksmanship." It was true, but incomplete. Like saying a surgeon learned basic first aid. Ortiz accepted the answer at face value and moved on to harass Torres about some previous mission that had become team legend. The banter filled the armory with the easy profanity and dark humor that soldiers used to process the violence they inflicted and endured. Chun listened while working, learning the team dynamics through their jokes. Who trusted whom? Who had saved whose life? Who still owed whom money from a card game in Bagram? Torres finished his inspection and began reassembly. His hands moved with the confidence of thousands of repetitions, each component sliding into place with practiced certainty. Chun watched peripherally, noting his technique and comparing it to her own training. Different schools taught different methods, but the fundamentals remained constant. A younger SEAL named Marcus Webb approached Chin's workstation carrying extra loaded magazines. He set them down near her pack. "Thought you might need these," Webb said. "Standard loadout if things get spicy." Chun looked at the magazines, then at Webb. His expression was genuinely helpful, no condescension. She recognized the impulse. He was trying to take care of a team member he assumed might not be fully prepared for combat. "Thank you," Chun said. "That is thoughtful." Webb smiled and returned to his own preparations. Chun added the magazines to her kit. The ammunition was 5.56 for standard carbines. Useless for her actual weapon, but she accepted it gracefully. When a mission went sideways, if the mission went sideways, she would have more than enough of the right caliber already loaded. Reeves entered the armory at 20:20, his presence shifting the atmosphere from casual to focused. The lieutenant commander moved between workstations, checking preparations with questions that revealed his attention to detail. He spent 5 minutes with Torres discussing environmental factors and range cards. When Reeves reached Chun, he kept his voice neutral. "Equipment satisfactory, Sergeant?" Chun met his eyes briefly. "Yes, sir. Ready for tasking." The exchange was professional and unremarkable. But Reeves held her gaze for half a second longer than necessary. The silent communication was clear. She understood. He understood. Nobody else needed to understand yet. The team moved to final staging at 2300. Body armor was donned and adjusted. Helmet-mounted night vision was tested. Communications gear went through radio checks that filled the air with static and call signs. Chun integrated herself into the flow without drawing attention, just another person preparing for insertion. The helicopter crouched on the tarmac like a predator waiting to launch. Its rotors began their slow turn as the SEALs approached, each man finding his assigned position with choreographed precision. Chun was directed to a seat near the rear ramp, positioned between medical supplies and communications equipment. The placement was logical for support personnel. She strapped in and settled her pack between her boots. The rifle case was secured against her leg, its weight familiar and reassuring. Around her, SEALs made final adjustments and checked their neighbors. The camaraderie was evident in touches to shoulders, nods of readiness, the unspoken language of men about to step into danger together. Torres sat opposite Chun, his own rifle across his knees. He caught her eye and raised his voice over the increasing rotor noise. "First combat deployment?" he asked. Chun considered her answer. "Technically no. Actually no. But the truth was complicated and unnecessary." She shook her head. "Been forward before," she replied. "Different capacity." Torres accepted this and returned his attention to his weapon. The conversation ended there, swallowed by the roar of turbines spooling to full power. Chun watched the SEAL sniper through her peripheral vision, noting how he held his rifle, how his breathing remained steady despite the approaching insertion. Professional competence recognizing professional competence, even if only one of them knew it. The helicopter lifted with the stomach-dropping sensation of controlled falling upward. Through the open ramp, base lights fell away into darkness. The pilot banked hard, and the valley opened below them, invisible except where moonlight caught on streams and rock faces. Chun felt the familiar pre-mission clarity settling over her thoughts. Fear became focus. Uncertainty became tactical planning. The helicopter was just transport. The mission was just another problem to solve through preparation and execution. She had done this before in places these SEALs would never know about, and she would do it again after they returned to their teams and forgot the quiet Marine who had tagged along. 30 minutes into flight, Ortiz leaned across the cabin and tapped Chen's boot. When he had her attention, he pointed to her pack and made a questioning gesture about weight. Chen gave a thumbs up. Everything secure, everything manageable. What Ortiz could not know was that Chun had carried heavier loads across worse terrain. She had moved through mountains in Afghanistan where the altitude made every breath a battle. She had low-crawled through Iraqi deserts where the heat turned body armor into an oven. The pack she carried tonight was almost comfortable by comparison. Webb caught her eye and gave an encouraging nod. These men were genuinely trying to help someone they believed might struggle with the physical demands ahead. Chen appreciated the intent even as she recognized the irony. In 6 hours, their perspective would shift dramatically. But for now, she accepted their concern with quiet gratitude. The helicopter began its descent toward the landing zone. Reeves held up 5 fingers. 5 minutes. The team shifted from relaxed to ready, weapons coming up, night vision being activated. Chen pulled her own night vision into place, and the world transformed into greenlit clarity. Torres moved to the edge of the ramp, his rifle ready. 2 other SEALs took positions beside him, prepared to provide immediate security on landing. Chen remained at her seat until directed otherwise, playing her assigned role perfectly. The skids touched earth with barely a bump. The SEALs flowed out in practiced sequence, establishing a perimeter while the helicopter crew kept engines running for quick departure. Chun exited last, moving to her assigned position in the formation without needing direction. The helicopter lifted immediately, its noise fading into the distance until only mountain silence remained. The team held security for 60 seconds, listening for any indication they had been detected. Nothing but wind and the distant sound of water over rocks. Reeves' hand signaled the movement order. The SEALs began their patrol toward the target area, night vision turning the darkness into navigable terrain. Chun fell into the formation where indicated, maintaining proper spacing and tactical awareness. They moved through the mountains like ghosts, each footfall placed with care to minimize noise. Chun matched their pace easily, her breathing controlled despite the elevation and the weight she carried. Around her, the SEALs demonstrated the skills that made them elite, but she had trained in the same mountains under instructors who believed movement discipline was the difference between mission success and body bags. 2 hours into the patrol, they reached the first checkpoint. Reeves called a brief halt for hydration and navigation confirmation. Chun took the opportunity to adjust her pack straps, a movement that brought Torres' attention. "You doing okay?" he asked quietly. Chun nodded. "Good to go." Torres studied her for a moment in the green glow of night vision. Something in her posture or her breathing pattern registered as unexpected. But before he could pursue the thought, Reeves signaled movement resumption. The patrol continued. Chun knew they were approaching the ridgeline, where Torres would establish his sniper position. Her own role remained undefined in the minds of most team members. Support, backup communications, maybe medical assistance if someone got hit. She let them maintain those assumptions. The truth would reveal itself soon enough. It always did. For now, Maya Chun simply moved through the darkness with 8 Navy SEALs who had no idea that the most lethal person on this mission was the quiet woman they had positioned near the medical supplies. The ridgeline appeared through the darkness like a jagged spine cutting across the valley. Torres moved forward with Reeves to scout the primary sniper position while the rest of the team established a defensive perimeter. Chun remained with the main element, her position assigned near a cluster of rocks that provided cover and concealment. She used the pause to study the terrain through her night vision. The target compound sat 800 meters downslope, exactly as the briefing had indicated. Stone walls surrounded a central courtyard where intelligence suggested the high-value target would meet his associates at dawn. Guard towers at 2 corners. Single vehicle gate on the north side. Predictable defenses for someone who believed his remote location provided security. Torres returned 15 minutes later and set up his position with methodical care. He cleared rocks that might interfere with his shooting platform, arranged his gear for quick access, and settled into a prone position that would allow him to remain comfortable for hours. Chun watched the process with professional interest, noting techniques that matched her own training and small variations that reflected his personal experience. Ortiz moved past Chun to deliver extra ammunition to Torres. He paused beside her on the return trip. "You'll be here if we need communications relay," Ortiz said quietly. "Stay low and stay quiet. This position might take indirect fire if things go bad." Chun acknowledged the warning with a nod. Ortiz meant well. He was trying to prepare someone he believed might not fully grasp the danger of being on a ridgeline when enemies started shooting back. She appreciated his concern even as she calculated fields of fire and covered positions with the automatic assessment of someone who had survived situations far worse than this. The team settled into pre-dawn stillness. SEALs occupied positions that provided overlapping fields of fire while remaining concealed from the compound below. Reeves established the command position near Torres, close enough to coordinate but far enough to avoid clustering. Chun remained where positioned, sitting with her back against a boulder that provided protection from below. She opened her pack with careful silence and extracted the items she would need when circumstances changed. The rifle case came out first, placed beside her with the opening facing away from curious eyes. Extra magazines went in easy reach. Rangefinder, Kestrel weather meter. The tools of precision shooting arranged in the configuration she had used on 3 continents. Nobody was watching. They were focused on the compound, on their sectors of responsibility, on the mission that was about to unfold. Chun used their distraction to prepare for the role she knew was coming. Not hoped, not suspected. Knew, because Reeves had read the same intelligence reports she had read, and those reports indicated enemy counter-sniper capability in this region. The sky began its slow transition from black to deep blue. Stars faded incrementally as the horizon prepared for sunrise. In the compound below, lights appeared in windows. Movement began, guards changing shifts, someone starting a cooking fire. The mundane routine of a place that did not yet know death was watching from above. Torres made minute adjustments to his scope. His breathing had settled into the shallow rhythm snipers use to minimize movement. Chen recognized the pattern because she employed the same technique. Slow the heart rate. Control the breath. Become part of the landscape rather than a person occupying it. Reeves keyed his radio with a click. All positions reported ready. The mission timeline was entering its critical phase. Within the next hour, the target would appear for his meeting and Torres would take the shot that justified this entire operation. Chen opened her rifle case with movements so subtle they produced no sound. The weapon emerged in pieces that she assembled by touch rather than sight. Stock attached. Optic mounted. Bolt inserted and cycled to verify function. The familiar weight settled into her hands like an extension of her own body. She kept the rifle low, below the sight line of the SEALs around her. This was preparation, not presumption. If Torres completed his mission successfully, her weapon would return to its case unused, and nobody would question why the support Marine had brought precision shooting equipment. If Torres went down, questions would become irrelevant because mission success would demand immediate action. The compound grew clearer as dawn approached. Chen could make out details now without night vision. The guard towers held 2 men each, both carrying 8-pattern rifles with casual familiarity. A technical vehicle sat near the gate, its mounted machine gun unmanned but accessible. The central building showed signs of recent reinforcement. Someone had added sandbags and improved the firing positions. Torres noted the same details through his scope. He whispered observations to Reeves, who marked them on his tactical map. The intelligence had been accurate but incomplete. The target had upgraded his security since the last satellite pass. That complicated things, but did not fundamentally change the mission parameters. Movement in the compound drew everyone's attention. A convoy of 3 vehicles approached from the south, dust trails visible in the growing light. They entered through the main gate and disgorged passengers who moved with military bearing. Not the target yet, but associates arriving for the meeting. Chen counted 8 new combatants, all armed, all moving with tactical awareness that suggested training beyond basic militia level. She filed the information away and continued her own preparation. Her shooting position was not ideal from this angle. If she needed to engage, she would have to move 12 meters to her left where a natural depression provided better sight lines. Torres shifted slightly, adjusting for the new positions of guards and associates. His shot angle remained clear, but the margin for error had decreased. More people in the compound meant more eyes potentially looking outward at the wrong moment. The sun broke the horizon with sudden brilliance that transformed the valley. Torres flipped his scope to daylight settings. Reeves scanned the compound through binoculars, searching for the specific face they had been sent to find. The SEALs maintained their positions with the patience of men who understood that rushed operations produce casualties. Chen felt the familiar pre-engagement clarity settling over her thoughts. Time seemed to slow and sharpen simultaneously. She was aware of wind speed, temperature, the angle of sunlight, the distance to targets both seen and anticipated. Her mind ran calculations automatically, building a tactical picture that would support split-second decisions if required. A black SUV emerged from the main building. The doors opened, and 3 men stepped out. Reeves stiffened slightly. Torres adjusted his scope fractionally. The target had appeared. Chen could see him even without optics. Medium height, gray beard, moving with the confidence of someone who believed himself untouchable. He wore traditional clothing, but carried himself like a man accustomed to giving orders that resulted in death. Intelligence photos matched the figure crossing the courtyard. Torres began his breathing cycle, finger moving to the trigger, final calculations being processed. The shot was perhaps 90 seconds away. Then everything changed. The crack of a rifle shot echoed across the valley, but did not come from Torres' position. It came from a hillside 700 meters to the east. The sound was followed immediately by the wet impact of a bullet striking flesh. Torres jerked backward, his shoulder erupting in blood. He collapsed behind his rifle, gasping in shock and pain. The enemy had a sniper, and that sniper had just taken out the primary American shooter before the mission could begin. Reeves was moving before Torres hit the ground, dragging the wounded SEAL away from the exposed position. Ortiz and Webb rushed forward to provide security while chaos erupted in the compound below. Guards scattered for cover. The target disappeared back into the building. The carefully planned operation was disintegrating. Chun was already moving, not toward Torres and the sudden medical crisis, not toward cover from the enemy sniper who had just demonstrated lethal competence. She moved left, toward the depression she had identified earlier, her rifle coming up as she dropped into a shooting position that gave her sight lines to both the compound and the hillside where the enemy shooter had fired. Reeves' voice cut through the chaos on the radio, sharp and commanding. "Iron Wolf sniper, take point." The words seemed to freeze the SEALs in place. Heads turned. Eyes found Chun, now fully settled into a prone shooting position with a rifle none of them had seen her carrying. The quiet support Marine had transformed into something else entirely, and the call sign Reeves had just used made several team members exchange glances of sudden comprehension. Chin's voice came back calm and professional, as if taking over primary sniper duties during an active engagement was simply another task to complete. Iron Wolf moving to primary position, acquiring targets now. Her scope found the enemy hillside first. There, muzzle flash signature still fading. Distance 730 meters. Wind 3 knots from the west. Temperature rising. She made microscopic adjustments and waited for the enemy sniper to make his inevitable mistake. In the compound, the target was being rushed toward an armored vehicle. Guards provided covering fire toward the American position even though they had no clear targets. Bullets impacted rocks around the SEAL perimeter. Webb returned fire with controlled bursts. But Chin ignored all of it. Her world had narrowed to the scope picture and the enemy sniper who thought he had won this engagement. She controlled her breathing, slowed her heart rate, became absolutely still. The enemy shooter shifted position, probably preparing for a follow-up shot. The movement was minimal but enough. Chin saw the outline. Calculated. Compensated. Squeezed. Her rifle spoke once. The sound was sharp and final. The enemy sniper dropped from sight. 730 meters away, Chin watched through her scope as the figure collapsed behind the ridgeline. The threat was neutralized, but there was no time to confirm a kill. The compound below had erupted into coordinated defensive action that suggested these were not the amateur fighter's intelligence had predicted. Chin shifted her aim point to the compound. Guards were moving with tactical discipline, establishing overlapping fields of fire and using cover effectively. The target had disappeared into the armored vehicle, which was now maneuvering toward the gate. She had perhaps 20 seconds before he escaped. The vehicle presented a problem. Armored glass, reinforced body panels. A direct shot through the windshield might penetrate, but the angle was poor and the target was not visible. Chun scanned for alternatives, her mind processing options with mechanical efficiency. There, the driver's window was partially open. Not much, maybe 4 inches, but enough. The geometry was difficult. She would need to thread the shot through that narrow gap at an angle that allowed the bullet to continue into the passenger compartment where the target sat. Chun made rapid calculations. 812 meters to the vehicle. Wind had shifted to 4 knots. Temperature climbing as the sun rose. The vehicle was moving at approximately 15 kilometers per hour. She had one chance. Her breathing slowed to almost nothing. The crosshair settled on a 0.6 inches ahead of the driver's window, compensating for vehicle movement and bullet flight time. The world reduced to that single point of focus. She pressed the trigger with steady pressure. The rifle recoiled. The bullet flew. Time seemed to suspend as the round crossed the valley. Chun was already cycling the bolt, chambering a fresh round, maintaining sight picture. 800 meters at 3,000 feet per second meant roughly 1 second of flight time, plus the margin for calculation errors and environmental factors. The vehicle's front window exploded. The driver slumped forward. The SUV swerved violently and crashed into a compound wall. Chun shifted her aim to the passenger door that was now forced open by someone trying to escape the crashed vehicle. A figure emerged stumbling. Gray beard, traditional clothing. The target. Chen's second shot took him in the center mass before his feet fully cleared the vehicle. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Mission accomplished, but the compound was not finished fighting. Behind Chun, Reeves was coordinating the chaos. Torres was being treated by Webb, who had medical training. Ortiz and 2 other SEALs were laying down suppressing fire toward guard positions that had started shooting at the American position. The team was pinned down by enemy fire that was becoming increasingly accurate. Chun ignored the noise and confusion. Her job was not suppression. Her job was precision elimination of threats. She methodically began working through the compound defenders. Guard Tower 1 held 2 men with AK rifles. They were firing wildly in the general direction of the SEAL position, but without clear targets. Chun put a round through the first guard's chest, cycled the bolt. The second guard turned to see his partner fall, and Chun shot him before he could acquire her position. Tower 1 neutralized. Muzzle flashed from a window in the main building. Someone with a PCAM machine gun was raking the hillside with fire that came close enough to make the SEALs hug the ground. Chun waited for the shooter to pause to change ammunition belts. When he leaned out to scan for targets, she placed a round through his skull. The machine gun went silent. Movement near the gate. 3 fighters attempting to flank around to a position that would give them enfilade fire on the SEAL perimeter. Chun tracked the lead man. Fired. He fell. The second man froze in confusion, and Chun dropped him with her next shot. The third man had the good sense to retreat back into cover. Ortiz had stopped firing. He was staring at Chun with an expression that mixed shock with dawning comprehension. Around him, other SEALs were beginning to understand that the quiet Marine they had dismissed as support was systematically dismantling the enemy force with surgical precision. Reeves keyed his radio. "Iron Wolf, what is your ammunition status?" Chun answered without taking her eye from a scope. 14 rounds remaining. 7 targets identified. Request clearance to continue engagement. Cleared hot, Reeves replied. "We are preparing to move Torres to the extraction point. Keep them off us." Chun acknowledged and returned to her work. The compound defenders were becoming disorganized. Their sniper was dead. Their leader was dead. The Americans who were supposed to be pinned down were instead executing them one shot at a time from a position they could not locate. A technical vehicle started its engine and began moving toward the gate. If it escaped with reinforcements or heavy weapons, the tactical situation would deteriorate rapidly. Chun aimed for the driver, but the vehicle was moving erratically and the shot was partially obscured by the machine gun mounted in the bed. She shifted her aim point. The Technical's front tire exploded as her bullet struck it at the valve stem. The vehicle swerved and crashed into a wall, immobilizing it. The gunner in the back scrambled for the machine gun. Chun shot him before he could swing the weapon toward the SEAL position. Behind her, the team was moving. 2 SEALs carried Torres in a hasty litter fashion from tactical gear. Webb covered their movement while Ortiz maintained rear security. They were withdrawing toward the extraction point 3 kilometers north. Reeves moved to Chen's position. He dropped into cover beside her and spoke quietly despite the chaos. "Can you cover our withdrawal?" Chun fired again. Another guard dropped near the compound gate. She answered while cycling the bolt. "Affirm. I will displace in 2 minutes and catch up." Reeves hesitated. Leaving a single operator behind went against every instinct. But he also recognized that Chun was currently the only thing preventing the enemy from organizing an effective pursuit. He made the tactical decision. 2 minutes. Then you move. That is an order. Chun nodded. Reeves disappeared, moving after his team with the ground-eating pace of a man who had learned to run in combat boots. Chun returned her attention to the compound. The defenders were trying to organize. She could see someone directing others from the doorway of the main building. Probably a lieutenant or advisor who had survived the initial engagement. Chun put a round through the doorway. The directing stopped. 90 seconds. The SEALs would be clear of immediate danger, but still vulnerable to pursuit. Chen needed to ensure that pursuit did not materialize. She began engaging anything that looked like leadership or initiative. A man trying to rally others near the gate. Shot. Someone attempting to call on a radio. Shot. Two fighters preparing to leave the compound in a direction that would intercept the American withdrawal. Both shot in rapid succession. Her ammunition was running low. 8 rounds left. The compound had gone quiet. Bodies littered the courtyard. The survivors had taken cover and were staying there, unwilling to expose themselves to the invisible death that had claimed their comrades. Chen began her own withdrawal. She collected her brass out of habit and professional pride, then broke down her shooting position. The rifle was collapsed and secured. Her pack was shouldered. In 30 seconds, she had erased most evidence of her presence. She moved north through terrain that provided cover from the compound. Her pace was fast but controlled, eating distance without sacrificing tactical awareness. Behind her, sporadic gunfire suggested the defenders were shooting at shadows. They had lost the will to pursue. 20 minutes of hard movement brought her to a rally point where Ortiz was pulling security. His expression when he saw her approach was complex. Respect mixed with disbelief, mixed with something that might have been embarrassment at how completely he had misjudged her capabilities. Chen reached his position and took a knee, breathing heavily but still maintaining weapons discipline. Ortiz stared at her for a long moment before speaking. "What the hell are you?" he asked quietly. Chen checked her rifle and secured her gear before answering. Her tone was matter-of-fact, devoid of arrogance or false modesty. Marine Scout Sniper. Advanced Special Operations. My actual assignment was primary overwatch with Torres as backup. JSOC did not advertise it because operational security required the enemy to believe we only had one sniper. Ortiz processed this information. His next question came slowly. "How many did you drop back there?" Chun performed the mental arithmetic. The enemy sniper, the driver, the target, guards in both towers, machine gunner, the flanking element, the technical gunner, fighters near the gate. The total was 14. 14 confirmed, she replied. Possibly more if the shots through cover connected. Ortiz shook his head in amazement. He had been in firefights that consumed hundreds of rounds for a single kill. Chen had just executed 14 precision shots under combat stress in less than 10 minutes. He started to say something else, but Reeves' voice came over the radio calling for movement to the extraction point. They moved together through the remaining distance. Torres was conscious and stable, his wounds serious, but not life-threatening thanks to Webb's immediate treatment. The team maintained tactical spacing and weapons discipline despite their exhaustion and the weight of the casualties they carried. The extraction helicopter appeared on schedule, its silhouette stark against the morning sky. The team loaded quickly, establishing security until everyone was aboard. Chun was last in, taking her assigned seat as the aircraft lifted and banked away from the valley. Torres, strapped to a litter and dosed with morphine, caught Chen's eye across the cabin. His expression held questions that would wait for later. Around them, SEALs who had started this mission assuming Chun was support personnel were now reassessing everything they thought they knew. Reeves sat beside Chun as the helicopter gained altitude. He did not say anything immediately. The mission had succeeded despite catastrophic deviation from the plan. The target was eliminated. The team was intact, -1 wounded. By any measure, it was a win. Finally, Reeves leaned close enough to be heard over the engine noise. "Iron Wolf," he said. "Where did that call sign come from?" Chun looked out at the valley falling away below. Somewhere down there were 14 men who had learned too late that underestimating the quiet woman had been their final mistake. She answered without turning her head. "Wolves hunt in silence," she said, "and they never miss." The base medical facility smelled of antiseptic and old coffee. Torres was wheeled into surgery while the rest of the team went through post-mission procedures. Equipment turned in, weapons cleaned, debriefs scheduled. The routine tasks that followed combat operations regardless of how those operations had gone. Chun sat alone in an equipment bay, methodically cleaning her rifle. The weapon had performed flawlessly, but she maintained it with the same obsessive attention she always did. Each component was inspected, cleaned, lubricated, and reassembled. The ritual was calming after the chaos of the morning. Footsteps approached. Chen looked up to see Webb standing in the doorway, 2 bottles of water in his hands. He offered one to her without speaking. She accepted it, and he sat down on a gear crate nearby. "We thought you were intel," Webb said finally. "Or maybe comms. Torres even joked you might be someone's sister getting a deployment vacation." Chen did not respond immediately. She continued working on her rifle, running a patch through the barrel with practice strokes. Webb watched her hands move with the kind of precision that spoke to thousands of hours of practice. "I am sorry we did not take you seriously," Webb continued. "That was on us." Chen set down her cleaning rod and looked at him directly. "You had no reason to think otherwise. The operational security requirements meant I could not correct your assumptions. No apology is necessary." Webb nodded but still looked uncomfortable. "Still," he said, "you saved the mission. You saved us. Torres would be dead if that enemy sniper had gotten a second shot." Chen picked up her bolt carrier group and began inspecting it. "Torres would have done the same for me," she replied. "That is what teammates do." The simple statement seemed to ease something in Webb's expression. He took a long drink of water and changed the subject slightly. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "I have been through advanced marksmanship courses, and I could not make half those shots you made today." Chen considered how much to reveal. The truth was complicated and mostly classified, but Webb had fought beside her and earned some measure of honesty. "Marine Scout Sniper School," she said, "then Advanced Special Operations training with instructors who had been shooting longer than I have been alive. Then 3 deployments doing work that does not appear in official records. You learn or you do not come home." Webb absorbed this. "How many deployments total?" "For counting this one," Chen replied. "Iraq twice. Afghanistan. And 6 months attached to a unit I cannot name doing things I cannot discuss." The mystery seemed to satisfy Webb more than details would have. He stood to leave, but paused at the doorway. "For what it is worth," he said, "I am glad you were with us today. And I am glad I was wrong about you." Chun gave him a slight smile. "I'm glad you were wrong, too." After Webb left, Chun finished her weapon maintenance and secured her gear. The debrief was scheduled for 1400 hours. She had time to shower and grab food before facing the questions that would come. Questions about her shot selection, her tactical decisions, her unauthorized displacement from assigned position. Except Reeves had authorized it. "Iron Wolf, take point." Those 4 words had shifted her from support to primary sniper, and everything that followed had been within the scope of that authorization. Still, someone higher up the chain of command would want explanations for why the mission profile had changed so dramatically. The shower was brief and hot. Chen stood under the spray and let the water wash away the dust and sweat of the morning. Her shoulder ached from the rifle's recoil. 14 shots in rapid succession, some of them from awkward positions, had left her muscles protesting. She would be sore tomorrow, but that was acceptable. Sir Men alive. The dining facility was mostly empty during the midday lull. Chun filled a tray with food she did not particularly want, but knew she needed to eat. She found a corner table and began mechanically consuming calories while her mind replayed the engagement. The enemy sniper had been good. Not great, but competent enough to hit Torres on a first shot from 700 meters. That suggested training beyond militia standard. Syrian? Iranian advisor? Foreign fighter with military experience? The question nagged at her because it implied enemy capability assessments might be wrong. Ortiz appeared with his own tray and sat down across from her without asking. He ate in silence for several minutes before speaking. "Reeves wants to see you before the debrief," he said. "His office at 13:30. Chun nodded acknowledgement. Ortiz continued eating, but his body language suggested he had more to say. She waited. "I have been doing this for 8 years, Ortiz finally said. "SEAL teams, direct action, the whole package. I have worked with some serious operators. But what you did today was something else." Chen took a drink of water. "I did my job." Ortiz shook his head. "No, your job was support and communications." What you did was save our entire operation from turning into a disaster. Torres goes down, we lose Overwatch, the target escapes, and we're taking fire from defenders we cannot effectively engage. That mission was dead. You brought it back. The compliment was genuine, and Chen recognized it as such. But she also understood that Ortiz was processing his own assumptions and how badly they had misled him. She chose her words carefully. The enemy made mistakes, she said. They revealed their sniper position with the first shot. They did not anticipate a backup shooter. Their leader exposed himself during the confusion. I exploited their errors. That is not exceptional. That is basic tactics. Ortiz studied her expression. You really believe that? It was not a question, but Chen answered anyway. I believe that confidence without competence gets people killed. I also believe that competence without confidence gets people killed. The balance is knowing what you can do and doing it without hesitation when required. The philosophy seemed to resonate with Ortiz. He finished his meal and stood. See you at the debrief, he said. And Chen, for what it is worth, I would work with you again. Chen watched him leave and then returned to her own food. The acceptance from the SEALs mattered more than she wanted to admit. Respect from operators at that level was not easily earned, and she recognized the significance of what Ortiz had just offered. At 13:30, she knocked on Reeves' office door. His voice called her in. The lieutenant commander sat behind a desk covered in maps and reports, looking tired but satisfied. He gestured to a chair. Seat. We have 20 minutes before the formal debrief, and I want to cover some things first. Chen sat and waited. Reeves pulled out a folder marked with security classifications that made it clear this was not standard after-action paperwork. I just got off a call with JSOC, Reeves said. They're very pleased with the mission outcome. Target eliminated, minimal friendly casualties, intelligence gathered from the compound. By every metric, this was a success. He paused and looked at Chen directly. They also want to know why my after-action report lists a Marine sergeant with 14 confirmed kills when the mission profile only allocated for one sniper position. Chen kept her expression neutral. I can explain the tactical sequence if required, sir. Reeves waved that away. I know the tactical sequence. I was there. What I need to understand is why you did not inform the team of your actual role before insertion. The question was fair. Chen had considered it herself during the helicopter ride back. She organized her thoughts before responding. Operational security required compartmentalization, she said. If the team knew I was backup sniper, their behavior might have changed. Radio chatter might have referenced it. Small details that could have indicated to enemy surveillance that we had redundant capability. By maintaining my cover as support, we presented a single point of failure that made the enemy confident their counter-sniper could neutralize our Overwatch. Reeves considered this, and if Torres had not been hit, if the mission had gone perfectly, then my role would have remained unknown and the team would have completed the operation without ever knowing they had backup. Chen replied. That was acceptable. My ego does not require recognition. The answer seemed to satisfy Reeves. He made a note in the folder and then looked up again. The team knows now. They saw what you can do. That changes dynamics going forward. Chen understood what he was really asking. Will I continue to be effective now that the surprise is gone? She met his eyes. Respect is easier to work with than skepticism, she said. I will adapt. Reeves nodded slowly. JSOC wants you to remain attached to our operations for the next 3 months. They believe having you as embedded precision capability gives us options other teams do not have. How do you feel about that? Chen did not need to think about her answer. If the command believes I can contribute, I will serve where assigned. Reeves closed the folder. Good, because I agree with them. What you did today was not just good shooting. It was good tactics under pressure. That is rare. He stood, indicating the meeting was over. Chen rose as well. As she reached the door, Reeves spoke again. One more thing. The call sign. Iron Wolf. Where did it come from? Chen had been asked this before, though usually by people who had not earned the right to know. But Reeves had trusted her with his team's lives, and she owed him honesty. My first deployment, she said. Iraq, 2019. I spent 3 weeks in a hide site waiting for a target. Alone. No support. Living on minimal supplies. When the target finally appeared, I took the shot from 1,100 meters in wind conditions that should have made it impossible. My spotter, the only other person who knew I was there, said I had the patience of a wolf and the precision of iron. The name stuck. Reeves absorbed this. 3 weeks alone? Chen nodded. It was necessary for the mission. The lieutenant commander shook his head slightly. Most people would have broken mentally after 3 days in those conditions. Chen allowed herself a small smile. Most people are not snipers, sir. We're used to being patient. The formal debrief took 3 hours. Intelligence officers asked detailed questions about enemy positions, weapons observed, and tactical behavior. Chen answered each query with precision, describing site pictures and engagement sequences with the clinical detachment of someone reporting facts rather than reliving combat. When the intelligence section finished, a colonel from Special Operations Command took over. His questions focused less on what happened and more on why Chen had made specific tactical decisions. Why engage the sniper first instead of protecting the target? Why displace from her assigned position? Why continue engaging after the primary objective was eliminated? Chen explained her reasoning for each decision. The enemy sniper represented the immediate threat to team survival. Displacement was necessary to achieve proper sight lines. Continued engagement prevented organized pursuit of the withdrawing SEALs. Every choice had been tactical calculation rather than emotional reaction. The colonel seemed satisfied. He thanked her for her service and dismissed her with instructions to remain available for follow-up questions. Chen left the debrief room and found an entire SEAL team waiting in the hallway outside. Reeves stood at the front of the group. Behind him, Ortiz, Webb, and 4 other SEALs she had not yet gotten to know well. They had clearly been waiting for her to finish. "We are heading to the team room," Reeves said. "You should come." It was phrased as suggestion, but carried the weight of invitation. Chen recognized what was being offered. The team room was sacred space, reserved for operators and the bonds they formed through shared danger. Being invited meant acceptance at a level that went beyond professional respect. She nodded. "I would like that." The team room was sparse and functional. Worn couches, a battered table, lockers with names stenciled on them, and walls covered with unit patches and photographs from deployments going back years. Someone had started coffee brewing, and the smell filled the space with familiar comfort. Chen accepted a cup from Webb and found a seat on one of the couches. The SEALs arranged themselves around the room with the casual ease of people completely comfortable in each other's presence. For several minutes, nobody spoke. They simply existed together, decompressing from the mission in the way that soldiers had done since warfare began. Finally, Ortiz broke the silence. "So we're going to talk about how Chen dropped 14 guys in 10 minutes, or are we just going to pretend that is normal?" The question released tension that had been building. Several SEALs laughed. Chen found herself smiling despite her usual reserve. 14 confirmed, one of the other SEALs said. His name was Rodriguez, and he had been pulling rear security during the engagement. "But I'm betting some of those shots through walls connected too. Could be 16 or 17. Chen shook her head. "I only count confirmed visual kills. Anything else is speculation." Webb leaned forward from his position against the wall. "Walk us through it. The enemy sniper shot. What happened next from your perspective?" Chen set down her coffee and considered how to explain the cognitive process that had guided her actions. It was difficult to articulate something that had become mostly instinct through repetition. "Torres went down," she began. "My immediate assessment was that the enemy had a competent marksman in an elevated position we had not identified during planning. That represented a critical threat because he could systematically eliminate our team while we were pinned by compound defenders." She paused to organize her thoughts. The first priority was neutralizing that sniper. I had already identified a better shooting position during our initial setup, so I displaced while Reeves was moving Torres to cover. The enemy shooter had revealed his location with muzzle flash, and I had range and wind data from observing Torres' earlier work. "You took one shot," Rodriguez said. 730 meters. Moving target who knew Americans were present. "And you dropped him first round." Chen nodded. "He made a mistake. After hitting Torres, he shifted position to acquire a second target. The movement gave me a clear silhouette for 0.2 seconds. That was enough. Ortiz whistled softly. Most snipers I know would have taken 3 or 4 shots to bracket that target. You trusted your first round calculation. Hesitation gets people killed, Chen replied simply. I had confidence in my data and my weapon. The shot was difficult but achievable. What about the target himself? Webb asked. The vehicle was moving. He was in an armored SUV, and you threaded a shot through a partially open window. How is that even possible? Chen smiled slightly. It is not possible if you think about it too much. The calculation has to be automatic. Distance, movement, angle, environmental factors. Your brain processes all of it faster than conscious thought if you have done it enough times. She leaned back into the couch. I saw the window gap and recognized it as the only viable shot opportunity. The vehicle was moving in a predictable pattern, and I had perhaps 3 seconds before it reached cover. The math was complex, but the execution was simple. Lead the target, compensate for drop and wind, press the trigger. And the driver just happened to be in line with the passenger compartment, Rodriguez added. Actually, Chun corrected, I shot the driver deliberately. Stopping the vehicle created a secondary opportunity. When the target exited the crashed SUV, he presented a clear target at a known distance with no movement complications. The SEALs absorbed this. Chen had not just made lucky shots. She had created tactical opportunities through precision that forced the enemy into positions where they became vulnerable. Rees had been quiet during the exchange, but now he spoke. What Chen is not mentioning is that she did all of this while compound defenders were shooting at our position. Most people cannot make perfect shots on a flat range with no pressure. She did it under fire with teammates wounded and a mission failing. Chun felt uncomfortable with the praise. I did what I was trained to do. Ortiz shook his head. Training explains skill. It does not explain staying calm when everything is chaos. That is something else. That is the difference between being good at your job and being exceptional. An idea seemed to occur to him, and he stood up. Hold on. I want to show you something. He disappeared into a back room and returned with a laptop. After a few moments of typing, he turned the screen so everyone could see. It showed a map with colored icons marking positions. This is data from our helmet cameras and tracking systems, Ortiz explained. Blue icons are our team. Red is enemy. Look at the timeline. The map began animating, showing the engagement from a top-down perspective. Torres was hit. Chen displaced. Her position changed to one the system had not previously registered. Then red icons began disappearing in rapid succession. Each represented an enemy Chun had eliminated. 14 kills in 9 minutes 40 seconds, Ortiz narrated. Average time between shots was 41 seconds. Longest gap was 2 minutes when she was displacing to cover our withdrawal. Shortest was 7 seconds when she took out the flanking element. He looked at Chun with something approaching awe. You were running a systematic elimination pattern. Tower guards at first to remove Overwatch threats. Machine gunners second to stop suppressive fire. Then mobile threats, then targets of opportunity. You were not just shooting. You were solving the tactical problem one bullet at a time. Chen had not thought about it in those terms during the engagement. She had simply identified threats and eliminated them in priority order. But seeing the pattern visualized made her realize how automatic her tactical processing had become. It is easier when you're not the one being shot at directly, she said. The enemy was focused on the main team position. That gave me freedom to work without immediate pressure. Webb laughed. You had freedom because they did not know where you were. And they did not know where you were because you kept moving and never gave them a second shot from the same position. That is tradecraft at a level most snipers never achieve. The conversation continued for another hour. SEALs asked questions about specific shots, about Chen's training, about other missions she had run. She answered what she could, while keeping classified details appropriately vague. The atmosphere was relaxed, but carried an undertone of genuine curiosity. These men wanted to understand what made Iron Wolf exceptional. Eventually, someone mentioned that Torres was out of surgery and in recovery. The mood shifted from analytical to concerned. Reeves stood and announced that visiting hours started in 20 minutes. The team began gathering to go check on their wounded teammate. Chun started to excuse herself, assuming the visit was for core team members only. But Reeves caught her arm. "You're coming too," he said. "Torres will want to see you." The recovery ward was quiet. Torres lay in a bed with his shoulder heavily bandaged and 4 drip running into his arm. He was conscious but groggy from medications. When the team entered, his eyes found Chun immediately. "The woman who saved my life," Torres said, his voice slightly slurred. "They told me you took over my shot. Told me you got 14. I did not believe it." Chun approached his bedside. 14 confirmed. The target is eliminated. Mission accomplished. Torres tried to laugh, but it turned into a wince. "My shot was supposed to be the easy one. 800 meters, stationary target, perfect conditions. You got stuck with the hard version." "Someone had to," Chun replied. "You would have done the same." Torres reached out with his good hand, and Chun took it. His grip was weak, but the gesture was significant. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Seriously, thank you." The room fell silent. These men dealt with violence and death as profession, but gratitude between warriors carried weight that civilians could never fully understand. Chun squeezed Torres' hand gently. "Heal up fast," she said. "I prefer working with you as primary. Backup is stressful." That got a genuine laugh from Torres despite the pain. "You're a backup," he said. "Damn, the best sniper I know is playing second chair. What does that make me?" "Third chair now," Ortiz called from across the room. Chun moved up. The team stayed for 30 minutes, filling Torres in on the debrief and the colonel's reaction. They carefully avoided mentioning how close the mission had come to complete failure, focusing instead on the successful outcome. Torres listened with growing alertness as the medications wore off slightly. Before they left, Torres looked at Chun one more time. "Iron Wolf," he said. "I heard Reeves use that call sign, but I did not know what it meant. Now I do. You hunt in silence, and you never miss." Chun gave him a slight smile. "Heal quickly. We have more work to do." As the team filed out of the recovery ward, Reeves fell in a step beside Chun. His voice was low enough that only she could hear. "They respect you now. Genuinely. That is rare for outsiders." Chun understood what he meant. SEAL teams were insular by nature, protective of their culture and their standards. Being accepted as an equal rather than just an attached asset was significant. "I respect them too," she replied. "They are professionals. Today proved that." Reeves nodded. "Tomorrow we start planning the next operation. JSOC has 3 potential targets, and they want our assessment. You will be included in the planning from the start this time." Chun felt something shift inside her. Not pride exactly, but satisfaction. She had proven herself under the worst possible circumstances and earned her place. Now the real work could begin. "Good," she said. "I am ready." 3 days after the mission, Chun found herself in a planning room with the full SEAL team reviewing intelligence for their next operation. The shift was subtle but significant. She sat at the table rather than standing in the back. Her input was solicited rather than tolerated. The dynamics had fundamentally changed. Reeves spread satellite imagery across the table. The target was a compound in northern Syria housing a logistics coordinator for a regional terror network. Intelligence indicated the coordinator was facilitating weapons transfers and planning attacks against coalition forces. The mission profile called for direct action with precision engagement to minimize collateral damage. Webb traced potential approach routes on the imagery. His finger stopped at a ridgeline overlooking the compound from the east. "That is our overwatch position. Clear sight lines, good cover, approximately 900 meters to primary structures." Chun studied the topography. The ridgeline was solid, but exposed to a second elevated position 300 meters to the south. She pointed to that position on the map. "Potential counter-sniper location here," she said. "Same mistake the enemy made last time. If they have learned from that engagement, they might position someone there." Ortiz leaned forward to examine where Chun was indicating. "You think they know we have a sniper capability?" "They know now," Chun replied. 14 confirmed kills from precision fire gets reported up enemy chains of command. They will adapt. Rodriguez nodded agreement. So we assume they have Overwatch on our Overwatch position. How do we counter that? Chun considered the problem. The geometry was challenging, but not impossible. If she positioned on the ridgeline, she would be vulnerable to the southern position. But if she positioned to counter that threat, her angles to the compound would be compromised. Two-shooter problem, she said finally. One takes primary Overwatch on the compound. The other focuses on counter-sniper responsibilities. If the enemy positions someone on that southern elevation, we eliminate them before they become a factor. Reeves looked at her with interest. You are suggesting we split our precision capability? Chun shook her head. Torres is still recovering. I am suggesting I handle both positions sequentially. Establish on the southern position first. Clear any enemy Overwatch. Then displace to the primary ridgeline for compound engagement. The room went quiet as the SEALs processed the tactical complexity of what she was proposing. Moving between sniper positions during an active operation was dangerous. It required perfect timing and exposed her to detection during displacement. That is a lot of ground to cover, Webb said carefully. And if the enemy has counter-sniper capability in both locations? Then I prioritize the immediate threat and adapt, Chun replied. But staying static in a predictable position is what got Torres shot. Movement creates uncertainty for the enemy. Ortiz studied the map with renewed focus. If Chun clears the southern position, she buys us freedom of movement on the primary approach. We could use that 300-meter gap to insert closer without exposure to elevated fire. Reeves traced the potential movement with his finger. The tactical advantages began to stack. If Chun could secure both elevated positions, the team's infiltration risk dropped significantly. But it placed enormous responsibility on a single operator. You understand what you are proposing, Reeves said to Chun. You would be operating alone, potentially engaging multiple targets, then displacing under possible enemy observation. If something goes wrong, we cannot support you immediately. Chun met his eyes without hesitation. I understand, but the alternative is accepting higher risk to the team or abandoning the mission if enemy Overwatch is positioned. This approach gives us the best probability of success. Webb spoke up. What if we position someone with you? Another shooter to provide backup? Chun considered this but shook her head. Two people moving between positions creates twice the signature. And honestly, another shooter would not significantly improve my capability, but would increase detection risk. The confidence in her voice was not arrogance. It was the simple assessment of someone who knew exactly what she could accomplish and what she could not. The SEALs recognized that quality because they operated the same way. Reeves made his decision. We planned for Chun to clear southern Overwatch, then displace to primary position. Insertion timeline gets pushed back 2 hours to give her movement window. Team holds at rally point until she confirms both positions secure. The planning continued for 3 more hours. Details were refined. Contingencies were developed. Communication protocols were established. Chun contributed throughout, her tactical input carrying equal weight to the experienced SEALs around the table. When the planning session broke up, Rodriguez approached Chun. He had been quiet during most of the discussion, but his expression suggested he had been thinking about something. Can I ask you a personal question? He said. Chun nodded. Of course. Rodriguez chose his words carefully. How you deal with it? The knowing that 14 people are dead because you pulled a trigger. Does that weight stay with you? The question was genuine, asked by someone trying to understand rather than judge. Chun appreciated the honesty. Every shot I take is justified, she said. The targets are enemy combatants actively threatening American lives. I do not lose sleep over protecting my teammates. She paused, considering how much more to share. But I do think about it, not with guilt, but with responsibility. Every bullet I fire represents a decision that someone will not go home to their family. I owe it to them and to myself to make absolutely certain that decision is necessary. Rodriguez nodded slowly. That is a heavy burden. It is the job, Chun replied. We do not get to pick easy choices. We just have to make the right ones. The conversation ended there, but Chun sensed she had passed some test in Rodriguez's eyes. These men were warriors, but they were not callous. They understood that killing, even justified killing, carried psychological weight. Her willingness to acknowledge that reality rather than pretend indifference had mattered. That evening, Chen returned to the range to verify her weapon zero. The base rifle range was empty at this hour, most personnel having finished training for the day. She preferred it this way. Shooting was meditation for her, a way to clear her mind and reconnect with the fundamentals of her craft. She set targets at 900 meters, matching the expected engagement distance for the upcoming mission. The first shot hit center mass. She made a minute adjustment and fired again. Perfect impact. 5 more shots confirmed her zero was accurate and her calculations were sound. Footsteps approached from behind. Chen did not turn, recognizing Ortiz's gait from working alongside him for days. He sat on the shooting bench next to hers and watched her work through the rest of her magazine. When she finished and began reloading, Ortiz spoke. "I've been thinking about what you said in the planning session, about movement creating uncertainty for the enemy." Chen nodded, waiting for him to continue. "That is operator-level tactical thinking," Ortiz said. "Most snipers focus on a shot. You are thinking about the entire battlefield geometry and how to manipulate enemy decision-making. Where did you learn that?" Chen finished loading her magazine and set it aside. "My instructors emphasize that sniping is psychology as much as marksmanship. The best shot is the one that never has to be taken because the enemy is too afraid to expose themselves. But if they do expose themselves, it has to be fatal immediately or the psychological effect is lost." She picked up her rifle and settled into position for another string. Movement serves multiple purposes. It prevents the enemy from predicting my location. It creates doubt about how many shooters we have. And it forces them to defend multiple positions simultaneously, which spreads their resources. Ortiz watched her fire another 5-round group, each bullet impacting within inches of the others at 900 meters. The consistency was remarkable even for someone with her training. "The team trusts you," Ortiz said when she paused to reload again. "That happened fast. Usually it takes months of working together before we accept someone at that level." Chen glanced at him. "Combat accelerates trust. They saw me perform under pressure. That matters more than time." "True," Ortiz agreed, "but it is more than that. You do not try to prove anything. You just do your job with quiet confidence. That is rare. Most people with your skill level need everyone to know about it." Chen smiled slightly. "My skill level speaks for itself when necessary. The rest of the time, I would rather people underestimate me. It is tactically advantageous." Ortiz laughed. "I'm beginning to understand that. You used our assumptions against us during that first mission. We thought you were support, so we did not adjust our behavior when you were listening. How much did you learn about us just by staying quiet and watching?" "Everything," Chen replied. "I knew Rodriguez was cautious and detail-oriented. Webb is naturally helpful and protective. You are aggressive but thoughtful. Reeves trusts his team but maintains appropriate distance as commander. Torres is confident, bordering on cocky, but with the skills to back it up." She fired another group before continuing. "Understanding team dynamics helps me integrate effectively. If I had announced myself as an elite sniper from the start, you would have reacted differently, possibly with resentment or skepticism. By staying quiet and proving myself only when necessary, I avoided that friction." Ortiz shook his head in admiration. "You think about everything, do not you? Every interaction is tactical calculation." Chen set down her rifle and looked at him directly. "Not calculation, awareness. There's a difference. I am not manipulating people. I am just paying attention to how they work and adapting my approach accordingly." The distinction seemed important to Ortiz. He stood to leave but paused. "For what it is worth, I'm glad you're on our side. The enemy does not stand a chance against someone who thinks like you and shoots like you." After he left, Chun finished her range work and cleaned her weapon. The conversation had revealed something interesting. The SEALs were not just accepting her capability. They were beginning to understand her methodology. That would make future operations smoother as they learned to anticipate her tactical thinking. She walked back to her quarters under a sky filled with stars. The base hummed with the constant activity of a forward operating location. Generators, baiklas, distant voices, the sounds of war that never stopped even when fighting paused. Chen thought about Rodriguez's question regarding the weight of taking lives. It was true that she did not lose sleep over justified kills, but she also never forgot that each target had been a person with their own story. That awareness kept her grounded and prevented the casual brutality that could infect soldiers who stopped seeing enemies as human. Tomorrow, they would finalize the mission plan. In 3 days, they would execute. And Chen would once again prove that the quiet Marine they had underestimated was exactly the operator they needed when everything went wrong. The helicopter insertion went perfectly. Too perfectly. Chen felt the familiar tension that came when operations proceeded exactly as planned. In her experience, smooth beginnings often preceded violent complications. She separated from a main team 2 kilometers from the target compound. The SEALs continued toward their rally point, while Chen moved alone through the darkness toward the southern elevation. Her pack carried everything she needed for 12 hours of independent operation: water, ammunition, minimal food, communications gear, and the rifle that had become an extension of her will. The terrain was rocky and steep. Chen navigated by night vision and careful foot placement, moving with the silent precision that her call sign implied. Every 30 meters, she paused to listen and observe. The enemy had proven they could position snipers effectively. She would not assume this high ground was unoccupied. 90 minutes of careful movement brought her to the southern position. She established observation from a covered location and spent 20 minutes scanning the area through her scope. No movement, no heat signatures, no indication of enemy presence. But Chen had learned to trust instinct over evidence, and her instincts said something was wrong. She keyed her radio with a double click. The signal told Reeves she had reached the position but had not yet declared it secure. The SEALs would hold at their rally point and wait. Chen moved to a different vantage point and scanned again. The elevated position offered commanding views of both the target compound and the ridgeline, where she would eventually establish her primary shooting position. Anyone occupying this ground would have significant tactical advantage. The enemy would know that just as well as she did. Then she saw it, a tiny reflection of starlight off glass. 800 meters northeast of her position, on a rocky outcrop she had initially dismissed as too exposed. Someone was there with optics, watching, waiting. Chen settled into a shooting position and brought her scope to bear on the location. The image resolved slowly. A man in local clothing occupying a shallow depression. A rifle beside him. Binoculars scanning the valley below. He was watching the likely American approach routes, probably hoping to spot the SEAL team before they reached the compound. The range was long, but manageable. Chen calculated wind and elevation. The target was stationary. She had time to ensure perfect shot placement, but killing him would create a new problem. Gunfire would alert the compound. The mission timeline would compress. The SEALs would lose their element of surprise. She keyed her radio. Iron Wolf to actual. Enemy sniper positioned northeast of my location. 800 meters. Request guidance. Reeves' response came after a brief pause. Can you neutralize without alerting compound? Negative, Chen replied. Suppressed fire would reduce signature, but at this range the crack of the supersonic round will be audible. Estimate 2 to 3 minutes before compound reacts. Another pause while Reeves calculated the tactical implications. Standby. Chen maintained her sight picture on the enemy sniper. He was good at his position discipline, moving minimally and keeping his profile low. But he had made the classic mistake of assuming his concealment was perfect. The tiny glint from his optics had revealed him. Reeves came back on the radio. Execute on your call. Team will accelerate approach once you fire. We gained 2 to 3 minutes on them scrambling to respond. Chen acknowledged and refocused on the shot. This was different from the chaos of the previous mission. This was deliberate, calculated. She would take a man's life with full knowledge and preparation, not in the heat of combat, but in the cold mathematics of tactical necessity. She controlled her breathing. The crosshairs settled on the enemy sniper's chest. Wind was minimal. Temperature stable. All variables accounted for. Her finger took up slack on the trigger. The rifle fired. The suppressor reduced the sound, but could not eliminate the supersonic crack of the bullet breaking the sound barrier. Chun watched through her scope as the target collapsed. Confirmed kill. The southern overwatch was now secure. She immediately began displacing toward the primary ridgeline. The compound would be reacting. Guard would scramble to defensive positions. The enemy would know Americans were present, but not where or how many. Chun had perhaps 8 minutes to reach her next position before the SEALs initiated their assault. Movement through hostile terrain, while time-constrained, required calculated risk-taking. Chun moved faster than she normally would, accepting slightly more noise and exposure in exchange for speed. Her route took her through a ravine that provided concealment but limited visibility. Vulnerable terrain, but necessary. She emerged from the ravine and began the climb to the ridgeline. Her legs burned from the pace and the elevation gain. Sweat soaked her uniform despite the cool night air. But she maintained focus on the objective. Position. Establish. Support the team. The ridgeline came into view. Chun slowed her approach and scanned for threats. Nothing obvious, but she remained cautious. The final 100 meters took 5 minutes of careful movement. When she finally reached her planned shooting position, she was breathing heavily, but her hands remained steady. She established her hide with practiced efficiency. Rifle positioned. Ammunition staged. Range card prepared with distances to key structures. Communications check with Reeves confirmed she was in position. The entire displacement had taken 7 minutes. She had 1 minute before the team initiated. Through her scope, Chun observed the compound scrambling to defensive posture. Guards were manning positions. Lights were coming on. Someone was shouting orders. They knew an attack was imminent, but not from which direction. Reeves' voice came through her earpiece. Iron Wolf, team is moving in 30 seconds. We have vehicle approaching compound from the west. Unknown if hostile or civilian. Chun shifted her scope to the western approach road. A pickup truck was indeed moving toward the compound at high speed. She zoomed in on the cab. For men. All armed. Definitely hostile. She keyed her radio. Hostile vehicle confirmed. For armed individuals. ETA to compound 2 minutes. Can you stop it? Reeves asked. Chun calculated the geometry. The vehicle was moving at approximately 60 kilometers per hour on a rough road. The range was decreasing, but the target was erratic in its movement. Hitting the driver at this distance with a moving platform required leading the shot by several feet and hoping the vehicle did not hit a bump at the wrong moment. Attempting, she replied. The truck bounced over rough terrain. Chun tracked it through her scope, waiting for the moment when the vehicle stabilized. There, a brief stretch of smoother road. She led the driver by 4 feet, compensated for wind, and fired. The driver slumped. The truck swerved violently and crashed into a ditch, rolling onto its side. 2 of the occupants were thrown clear. A third appeared trapped in the wreckage. The 4th began crawling away from the vehicle. Chun chambered another round and eliminated the 2 who had been thrown clear. The crawler made it behind cover before she could engage. One potential threat remained mobile, but the vehicle was neutralized. Good shot, Reef transmitted. We are moving. Chun shifted her focus back to the compound. The SEALs were approaching from the north using the dead ground she had identified during planning. The compound defenders were oriented toward the crashed vehicle to the west, exactly as Reeves had anticipated. The enemy was reacting rather than acting, always a tactical disadvantage. The first breach charge detonated on the compound wall. SEALs flowed through the gap with practiced violence. Chun provided overwatch, scanning for threats the ground team might not see. A guard appeared on a rooftop with an RPG. Chun shot him before he could aim the weapon. The RPG fell harmlessly inside the compound walls. Another guard tried to flank the SEALs from a secondary building. Chun eliminated him mid-movement. A third attempted to set up a machine gun position. Chun's bullet found him before the weapon was ready. The engagement became a symphony of precision violence. SEALs cleared rooms, while Chun protected their advance from elevated threats. Every time a defender tried to gain tactical advantage, she neutralized them. The coordination was seamless, built on trust and proven capability. Ortiz's voice came over the radio. 3 tangos moving to vehicles for escape. West side. Chun had already identified the movement. Her scope tracked the first man as he ran for a truck. She fired. He fell. The second man dove for cover behind a wall. Chun waited. Patience. He eventually had to move. When he did, she was ready. The third man reached a vehicle and started the engine. Chun put a round through the windshield and into the driver. The truck rolled forward without guidance and crashed into a building. Target building is clear, Reeves transmitted. Securing evidence. Chun, continue overwatch. For the next 12 minutes, Chun maintained vigilance while the SEALs conducted their site exploitation. She counted 8 confirmed kills from her ridgeline position. Combined with the enemy sniper and the vehicle occupants, her total for this mission was 13. The symmetry with the previous operation was not lost on her. Movement from the building where the crawler from the crashed vehicle had taken cover. Chun had not forgotten about him. Her scope found him attempting to escape during what he assumed was a lull in fighting. She centered the crosshairs and fired. 14. A part of her mind noted the number with grim acknowledgement. 14 again, as if the universe had decided that was her operational signature. 14 lives ended to protect American operators and accomplish the mission. Reeves called for extraction. The team began their withdrawal with Chun providing cover until they cleared the compound. Then she broke down her position and began her own movement toward the extraction point. The mission had taken 43 minutes from initiation to completion. At the landing zone, the SEALs were already loading when Chun arrived. Webb gave her a hand up into the helicopter, and she collapsed into a seat, finally allowing herself to acknowledge the exhaustion. Ortiz sat across from her and held up 14 fingers with a questioning expression. Chun nodded confirmation. Ortiz shook his head in amazement, but said nothing. The helicopter lifted and banked away from the objective. Below them, the compound burned where a fire had started during the assault. Reeves moved through the cabin, checking on his team. When he reached Chun, he sat beside her and leaned close to be heard over the engine noise. That displacement between positions was some of the finest tactical movement I have ever seen, he said. You made it look easy, but I know it was not. Chun was too tired to deflect the compliment. Thank you, sir. The team made it possible by trusting the plan. Reeves nodded. We trust you because you have earned it. Twice now you have been the difference between mission success and failure. He paused and then continued. JSOC wants to extend your attachment indefinitely. They're talking about making you a permanent asset to our unit. How would you feel about that? Chun looked out at the darkness rushing past. Permanent assignment to a SEAL team was unusual for a Marine, but these men had become her brothers through shared danger. The work was meaningful. The trust was real. I would be honored, she replied. 2 weeks after the Syria mission, Chun received official orders permanently attaching her to SEAL Team 3. The paperwork came with a promotion to staff sergeant and a pay grade increase that recognized her specialized capability. More importantly, it came with a locker in the team room with her name stenciled on it. Torres had returned to limited duty. His shoulder was healing well, but he would not be cleared for operations for another month. He spent his time in the team room reviewing intelligence and helping plan future missions. When Chun arrived with her orders, he was the first to congratulate her. Welcome to the team officially, Torres said, shaking her hand. Try not to make the rest of us look bad with your ridiculous shooting. Chun smiled. I will do my best to miss occasionally, just to maintain your ego. The banter felt natural now. The initial awkwardness of being an outsider had evaporated through combat and shared experience. These men had seen her at her best and trusted her completely. That trust was mutual. Reeves called a team meeting that afternoon. Intelligence had identified a high-value target operating near the Iraqi border. A bomb maker responsible for attacks that had killed dozens of coalition personnel. The mission profile was familiar. Infiltrate, locate, eliminate, extract. But this time, there was a complication. The target was meeting with an unknown individual that intelligence suspected might be an even more valuable capture opportunity. Two objectives instead of one. The tactical complexity multiplied. Chun studied the intelligence photographs. The meeting was scheduled to occur in a remote farmhouse surrounded by open terrain. Good fields of fire for overwatch, but limited cover for approach. The SEALs would be exposed during their movement to the objective. What is the priority? She asked Reeves. Primary target elimination or potential capture of the unknown individual. Reeves consulted his orders. JSOC wants both if possible. Primary target is confirmed kill. Unknown individual is capture preferred, but kill authorized if capture is not feasible. Chen nodded and returned to studying the terrain. The farmhouse had a single approach road and open ground on all sides. Any assault would be visible from hundreds of meters away, unless it happened at night with the element of surprise. Ortiz pointed to an irrigation ditch that ran within 50 meters of the farmhouse. If we use that for covered approach, we could get close before being detected. But we would need Overwatch to suppress any guards who spot us. Chun measured distances on the satellite imagery. The nearest elevation suitable for sniper support was 1,400 meters from the farmhouse. Extreme range even for her capabilities. She had made shots at that distance during training, but never in combat where variables multiplied. 1,400 meters, she said aloud. Possible but difficult. Wind conditions at that range require perfect calculation. Can you make the shots? Reeves asked directly. Chun met his eyes. I can make the shots, but my accuracy at that range depends on environmental factors I cannot fully predict. I would estimate 80% confidence on individual targets. Lower if they are moving. Reeves considered this. 80% is better than the alternative, which is no Overwatch at all. We need you on that position. The planning continued for hours. Insertion timing, communication protocols, extraction contingencies. Chun contributed throughout, her tactical input shaping the operation as much as any SEAL at the table. This was the acceptance Reeves had mentioned. She was not attached support anymore. She was integral to mission success. That evening, Chun returned to the range to practice at extreme distances. She set targets at 1,400 meters and began the painstaking process of refining her calculations. Wind reading at that range required reading mirage and vegetation movement across the entire bullet path. Temperature gradients affected trajectory in ways that were difficult to predict. Every variable mattered. Webb joined her after an hour. He watched her fire several shots, noting how she adjusted after each one based on impact observation. That is a hell of a long shot, Webb observed. She nodded without taking her eye from the scope. The bullet drops about 400 inches at this range. Wind can push it 3 feet laterally, and that assumes I calculated air density correctly based on temperature and altitude. She fired again. The shot impacted 6 inches left of center. Chun made a minor scope adjustment. How do you even see the target at that distance? Webb asked. Magnification helps, Chun replied. But mostly you are not shooting at what you see. You are shooting at where mathematics says the bullet will be when it arrives. The actual aiming point is several feet above and to the side of the target. Webb shook his head. I have done long-range shooting. I know the theory, but putting it into practice when people are shooting back is something else entirely. Chun fired 3 more rounds, grouping them within 8 inches at 1,400 meters. Acceptable accuracy, but not perfect. She would need to do better during the actual mission. The mind game is harder than the physical shot, Chun said. At this range, the bullet flight time is almost 2 seconds. You pull the trigger and wait. If the target moves during that time, you miss. If your wind call was wrong, you miss. If your range estimation was off by even 50 meters, you miss. She reloaded and continued. The key is accepting that you cannot control everything. You make the best calculation possible with available data and trust your training. Doubt creates hesitation, and hesitation creates failure. Webb absorbed this philosophy. You make it sound simple. It is simple, Chun replied. Not easy, but simple. Calculate. Compensate. Execute. Everything else is just noise. 3 days later, they inserted for the operation. The helicopter dropped them 8 kilometers from the target to avoid acoustic detection. Chun separated from the team and began her solo movement toward the overwatch position while the SEALs moved toward their covered approach route. The terrain was desert scrub and low hills. Chun moved through the darkness with careful navigation, using natural terrain features to mask her movement. The 1,400-meter shot required her to be on a specific ridgeline with a specific angle. There was no backup position that would work. She reached the ridgeline 2 hours before the scheduled meeting. Time to establish her hide, range the target area, and prepare for what would be the longest combat shots of her career. The farmhouse was barely visible even through her scope at maximum magnification. Chun built her shooting position with meticulous care. Every rock placement mattered. Every angle had to be perfect. She used her laser rangefinder to confirm the distance. 1,417 meters. She recorded wind speed and direction at her position, knowing it would be different along the bullet path. The sun rose slowly, revealing the farmhouse and surrounding terrain. Chun could see guards moving around the property. She counted 4 external security and assumed more inside. The primary target, an unknown individual, had not yet arrived. Reef checked in via radio. Iron Wolf, team, is in position, holding for target arrival. Chun acknowledged and continued her preparation. She had identified primary and secondary shooting lanes, calculated holdovers for different target positions, prepared range cards for quick reference. Everything that could be controlled was controlled. Movement on the approach road. 2 vehicles arrived and parked near the farmhouse. Men emerged. Chun studied them through her scope. One matched the photographs of the primary target. The other was unfamiliar, but carried himself with authority. Probably the unknown individual JSOC wanted captured. Both targets entered the farmhouse with their security detail. The meeting had begun. Reeves would wait until they emerged to initiate the assault. Chun maintained her vigil, watching guard positions and memorizing patterns of movement. 30 minutes passed, then an hour. The waiting was part of the job. Chun remained motionless, controlling her breathing and maintaining focus despite the discomfort of her position. Finally, movement from the farmhouse. The primary target, an unknown individual, emerged, walking toward the vehicles while discussing something. This was the moment. The SEALs would begin their approach, and Chun would need to provide precision fire support from almost a mile away. Reeves transmitted, "Team moving. Stand by for targets of opportunity." Chun settled into her final shooting position. The primary target, an unknown individual, were 40 feet apart. Security personnel surrounded them. The geometry was challenging but workable. A guard spotted the SEALs moving through the irrigation ditch. He raised his rifle and shouted a warning. Chun had perhaps 2 seconds before the entire farmhouse exploded into defensive action. She centered her crosshairs on the guard, applied her calculated holds for distance and wind. The shot was so far beyond normal engagement ranges that the target appeared as barely more than a heat shimmer in her scope. Chun pressed the trigger and began counting. 1,001. 1,002. The guard collapsed. Her bullet had arrived after nearly 2 full seconds of flight. The other guards whirled in confusion, unable to determine where the shot had originated. The SEALs used the confusion to close distance. They were sprinting now, racing to reach the farmhouse before the enemy organized. Chun provided covering fire, engaging guards who tried to establish defensive positions. Her second shot dropped a guard reaching for a radio. Third shot eliminated a fighter running toward a mounted weapon. Each engagement required complete recalculation. Each target moved differently. Each shot was a separate mathematics problem solved in seconds. The primary target was running toward his vehicle. Chun led him by 15 feet, accounting for his movement and the bullet flight time. She fired. The target stumbled and fell. Confirmed kill on primary objective. The unknown individual dove behind a vehicle. SEALs were closing fast, but he had drawn a weapon. Chun could not see him clearly, but she could see his shadow on the ground. She aimed for where his body should be based on the shadow position and fired through the vehicle. The shadow stopped moving. Either she had hit him or he was taking cover. Reeves' team reached the vehicles seconds later. Ortiz's voice came over radio. Unknown individual is wounded but alive. We have him. Chun maintained overwatch while the SEALs secured the target and neutralized remaining resistance. Her shot count for this engagement was 7, all at ranges exceeding 1,300 meters. All successful. The extraction was clean. The team moved to the landing zone with their captured objective, while Chun displaced from her position. By the time she reached the extraction point, the helicopter was already inbound. On the flight back, Reeves sat beside her again. His expression was one of genuine amazement. You shot through a vehicle at 1,400 meters and hit a target you could not see, he said. How is that even possible? Chun was cleaning her rifle, a habit she maintained even in the helicopter. Shadow geometry, she replied. I could see where his shadow fell, which told me his approximate position. The vehicle was thin metal that my round could penetrate. The calculation was complex but achievable. Reeves shook his head. Every mission you do something that should not be possible. At some point it stops being luck and starts being something else. Chun looked at him seriously. It is not luck and it is not magic. It is preparation meeting opportunity. I spent hundreds of hours practicing at extreme ranges. When the mission required those skills, I was ready. She reassembled her bolt carrier group and continued. That is what separates adequate from exceptional. Adequate shooters practice what they know. Exceptional ones practice what they might need. The captured individual provided intelligence that changed everything. Under interrogation, he revealed himself as a regional coordinator for a network that had been operating undetected for 3 years. The information he provided led to the biggest joint Operation SEAL Team 3 had undertaken in a year. Chun sat in a mission briefing with a room full of personnel that extended beyond her usual team. 2 other SEAL teams, intelligence analysts, air support coordinators, a Marine infantry company providing outer security. This was not a surgical strike. This was a full-scale assault on a compound housing multiple high-value targets. The operations officer laid out the plan on a massive display screen. The compound was fortified and defended by an estimated 40 to 60 enemy fighters. Multiple buildings, underground tunnels, prepared defensive positions. This would be a fight. Chen's role was critical. She would establish overwatch from a water tower 800 meters from the compound. Her position would provide commanding views of the entire objective area. 3 other snipers from the additional SEAL teams would occupy supporting positions. For the first time, she would be working as part of a coordinated sniper element rather than operating alone. After the briefing, the 4 snipers met to coordinate their sectors of fire and communication protocols. The other 3 were experienced operators Chun recognized by reputation. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Stone had over 100 combat kills. Petty Officer First Class Amanda Rivera had won multiple shooting competitions. Petty Officer Second Class James Park was known for his ability to make impossible shots in urban terrain. Stone took the lead in the planning session. His tone was professional, but carried the confidence of someone used to being the best shooter in any room. He pointed to the water tower on the map. Iron Wolf takes primary overwatch from the tower, Stone said. Rivera, you are on the eastern building providing crossfire. Park, western position for vehicle interdiction. I will establish on the southern ridge for counter-sniper. Chun studied the plan and identified a potential problem. The water tower offered excellent visibility, but zero cover if the enemy located her position. She would be exposed to return fire from multiple directions. The tower is a strong position for observation, but vulnerable if I get compromised, Chun said. What is the contingency if I take effective fire? Stone looked at her with an expression that suggested he did not appreciate the question. You are Iron Wolf. I heard you do not miss. Why would you get compromised? The comment was meant as compliment, but carried an edge that Chun recognized. Stone was asserting dominance, establishing that he was the senior sniper and his plan would be followed. She had encountered this dynamic before with operators who felt threatened by her reputation. Even perfect shooters can be located by muzzle flash or sound, Chen replied calmly. I am asking about contingency planning, not questioning the primary plan. Rivera spoke up before Stone could respond. She is right. That tower is exposed. We should have a secondary position identified in case she needs to displace under fire. Stone clearly did not like being corrected, but he was professional enough to accept the tactical logic. Fine. Secondary position is the northern building rooftop, 300 meters from the tower. If you get compromised, displace there and continue engagement. The planning continued for another hour. By the end, Chen had a clear understanding of her responsibilities and those of the other snipers. The coordination was more complex than operating alone, but the redundancy provided better coverage of the objective area. That evening, Chen checked her equipment with extra care. The upcoming operation was the largest she had participated in since joining the team. More moving parts meant more opportunities for things to go wrong. She verified her ammunition load, inspected her rifle, tested her communications gear. Everything had to be perfect. Webb found her in the equipment bay, performing her pre-mission ritual. He sat quietly and watched her work through her checklist with methodical precision. Big one tomorrow, Webb said. Chen nodded without looking up from her inspection. Biggest since I joined the team. 40 to 60 enemy fighters means sustained engagement. I am carrying twice my normal ammunition load. Webb leaned forward. What do you think about working with the other snipers? Chen considered the question. Stone is skilled, but he leads with ego. Rivera is competent and tactical. Park is young but talented. We will function effectively as long as everyone follows the plan. And if Stone tries to overrule you during the mission, Webb asked. Chen looked at him directly. Then I will ignore him and do what the mission requires. Reeves is the ground commander. His orders supersede any sniper element coordination. Webb smiled. That is what I was hoping you would say. The next morning brought perfect weather. Clear skies, minimal wind, good visibility, the kind of conditions that favored precision shooting. Chen loaded into a helicopter with Rivera and Park, while Stone moved separately to his southern position. The flight to the objective area took 30 minutes. Chen used the time to review her range cards and visualize her sectors of fire. Rivera sat across from her, also in pre-mission focus. Park was younger and showed signs of nervous energy that Chen remembered from her own early operations. You have done this before, Chen said to Park. Trust your training. Park looked at her with surprise. This is my first operation with multiple sniper elements. What if I miss a critical shot? Then one of us will take it, Chen replied. That is why we have overlapping coverage. No single shooter bears the entire burden. The simple reassurance seemed to ease Park's tension. Rivera caught Chen's eye and gave an approving nod. Good leadership transcended rank and specialization. The helicopter dropped Chen at the water tower. She climbed the external ladder while the bird lifted away to avoid drawing attention. The tower interior was exposed metal framework and a large water tank. Chen established her position on a maintenance platform that provided stable shooting but minimal concealment. Through her scope, she could see the compound clearly. Guards on rooftops. Vehicles positioned for rapid response. Prepared fighting positions around the perimeter. The enemy was ready for a fight. They just did not know it was coming today. Chen keyed her radio. Iron Wolf in position. Visual on compound. Counting 22 external security personnel. Stone acknowledged from his position. Rivera and Park checked in shortly after. The sniper element was established. Now they waited for the assault force to begin their movement. Reeves' voice came through clearly. All elements stand by. Hour and 10 minutes. Chen settled into her shooting position and began her final preparations. She identified priority targets, calculated holds for different ranges, prepared mentally for the violence that was about to unfold. 5 minutes to hour, a radio transmission crackled with unexpected urgency. It was Stone's voice, tense and sharp. I have movement on the southern approach. Multiple vehicles. Ahmed personnel. This is not on the timeline. Chen shifted her scope toward the southern road. She counted 3 technical vehicles with mounted weapons approaching the compound. Unknown reinforcements arriving at exactly the wrong time. If they reached the compound before the assault began, the enemy's strength would increase significantly. Reeves made a rapid decision. All sniper elements, engage approaching vehicles. Disable them before they reach the compound. Chun calculated range to the lead vehicle. 1,000 meters and closing. She aimed for the driver and fired. The truck swerved violently and crashed into a ditch. Rivera and Park engaged the second and third vehicles simultaneously. Within seconds, all three trucks were immobilized, but the fighters inside were dismounting and taking defensive positions. What had been a three-vehicle problem was now a 15 to 20 fighter problem position between the assault force and the objective. Stone's voice came over the radio. We just compromised the element of surprise. The compound is going to full alert. Chun watched through her scope as guards in the compound reacted to the gunfire. They were scrambling to defensive positions. The careful plan was unraveling. Reeves had seconds to decide whether to abort or adapt. All elements, Reeves transmitted. We are accelerating the timeline. Assault force moving now. Sniper element. Suppress compound defenses. Chun shifted her focus back to the compound. Guards were establishing positions on rooftops and behind walls. She began engaging systematically. First shot dropped a guard with an RPG. Second shot eliminated a fighter manning a mounted weapon. Third shot neutralized someone who appeared to be directing the defense. The engagement became the most intense of her career. Multiple targets. Constant movement. Friendly forces advancing under fire. She worked through her magazines with mechanical efficiency, each shot carefully placed to maximum effect. A guard appeared on the rooftop directly across from her position. He was scanning with binoculars, searching for the American sniper positions. Chun saw him focus on her tower. He dropped the binoculars and raised his rifle. She fired first. The guard collapsed, but not before getting a shot off that impacted the water tank 2 feet from her head. The tower position was compromised. Chun began gathering her gear for displacement to the secondary position. More incoming fire struck the tower structure. The enemy had identified her location, and multiple fighters were now engaging her position. Chun moved quickly down the ladder while bullets sparked off metal around her. She reached the ground and sprinted toward the northern building, using vehicles and walls for cover. Rivera's voice came over the radio, providing covering fire. Park was engaging targets, trying to cut off Chun's displacement route. Chun reached the northern building and climbed the external stairs to the rooftop. The new position offered different angles, but acceptable coverage. She re-established her shooting platform and resumed engagement within 90 seconds of leaving the tower. The assault force had breached the compound wall. SEALs were clearing buildings while taking fire from multiple positions. Chun provided overwatch, eliminating threats as they appeared. Her shot count was climbing rapidly. 12, 15, 18. A technical vehicle that had survived the initial engagement was trying to flank the assault force. Chun put 3 rounds through the windshield, stopping it permanently. 21 confirmed kills. Stone's voice came through with urgency. I have multiple fighters moving through the tunnel system. They are trying to escape to the south. Chun could not see the southern tunnel exit from her position, but she trusted Stone's call. Let them go or engage. Reeves made the tactical decision. Engage. We cannot let them escape to regroup. Stone began engaging the fighters as they emerged from the tunnel. Chun heard his rifle fire repeatedly. Then silence. Then his voice, strained with pain. I am hit. Shoulder wound. Continuing engagement. Chun felt a cold clarity settle over her. Stone was wounded but still fighting. The mission was at critical phase. Every shooter mattered. She scanned her sector for any way to support. Rivera transmitive. I am moving to support Stone's position. Negative. Reeves countermanded. Stay on your sector. Iron Wolf, can you see Stone's position? Chun adjusted her scope and found the southern ridge where Stone had established. She could see him behind cover, clearly struggling with his wounded shoulder. She could also see fighters moving through terrain that would bring them behind Stone's position. Affirmative, Chun replied. I have visual on Chief Stone and incoming threats to his 6. Engage, Reeves ordered. Chun began eliminating the threats, moving towards Stone. The range was extreme, and the targets were using cover effectively. She worked methodically, waiting for each target to expose themselves. 1 down, 2 down, 3 down. Stone's voice came through, grudging respect evident despite his pain. Good shooting, Iron Wolf. Stay down, Chen replied. I have you covered. The battle continued for another 20 minutes before the compound was fully secured. The assault force had accomplished their objectives. All high-value targets were captured or eliminated, but the cost had been higher than planned. Stone wounded. 3 other operators injured. Multiple enemy fighters had escaped through tunnels before they could be sealed. Chen's final count for the operation was 28 confirmed kills, the highest single-mission total of her career. The medical tent was organized chaos. Stone sat on a treatment table while a corpsman worked on his shoulder wound. The bullet had passed through muscle without hitting bone or major vessels. Painful but not career-ending. He would recover fully with time and rehabilitation. Chen entered the tent to check on him. Stone looked up and their eyes met. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Stone extended his good hand. You saved my life, he said simply. I was focused on the tunnel exit and did not see the flanking element. If you had not been watching my 6, I would be dead. Chen shook his hand. Any of us would have done the same. That is what teammates do. Stone shook his head. No, I need to say this. When we first met for planning, I dismissed you. I heard the stories about Iron Wolf, but I thought they were exaggerated. I've been doing this for 12 years, and I let ego convince me that nobody could be better than me. He winced as the corpsman tightened a bandage. Today you proved me wrong. 28 confirmed kills. Position displacement under fire. Precision shooting at extreme range while our guys were in contact. That was the finest combat shooting I have ever witnessed. Chun felt uncomfortable with the praise, but recognized that Stone needed to say it. Sometimes acknowledgement of error was as important as the tactical excellence that revealed it. You are an exceptional shooter yourself, Chen replied. Your call on the tunnel movement saved lives. We all contribute what we can. The corpsman finished his work and moved to the next patient. Stone stood carefully, testing his mobility. He looked at Chun with an expression that mixed respect and something that might have been friendship. When I get cleared for duty again, I would be honored to work with you on future operations, Stone said. Not as senior sniper trying to prove dominance. As an equal who has a lot to learn from your approach. Chen nodded. I look forward to it. Outside the medical tent, the sun was setting over the base. The operation had lasted all day and exhaustion was catching up with everyone involved. Chen found a quiet spot near the equipment staging area and sat down to process the events. 28 people were dead because she had pulled a trigger. The number was staggering even though every kill had been justified and necessary. She thought about Rodriguez's question from weeks earlier. How do you deal with it? The truth was that each mission left a mark. Not guilt exactly, but awareness of the weight her role carried. 28 families would not see their sons or fathers or brothers again. The fact that those men had chosen violence and threatened American lives did not erase their humanity in Chen's mind. She pulled out a small notebook she carried and made 28 marks on a page. A ritual she had started years ago. Each mark represented a life taken. She did not keep the count out of pride. She kept it as a reminder that her actions had consequences beyond tactical success. The notebook kept her grounded. Footsteps approached. Reeves sat down beside her without asking. He had that ability to know when someone needed company versus solitude. Right now, Chun appreciated the former. Hell of a day, Reeves said. Chun closed her notebook. Hell of a day, she agreed. They sat in silence for several minutes. The base around them continued its perpetual activity, but in this small pocket of space, there was quiet. JSOC is very pleased, Reeves finally said. The intelligence gathered from this operation is already producing results. We have locations for 3 additional high-value targets. Funding sources, supply routes. This is going to generate work for months. He paused before continuing. They want to put you in for Silver Star. 28 confirmed kills in a single engagement. Displacement under fire. Providing overwatch that prevented friendly casualties. The recommendation is already being drafted. Chun looked at him with surprise. A Silver Star was the third highest military decoration for valor. It was not given lightly. I was doing my job, Chun said. Reeves smiled. That is what everyone says when they do something extraordinary. But your job does not require you to be perfect under impossible conditions. That is choice. And today you chose to be exactly what this team needed when we needed it most. Chun did not know how to respond to that. She settled for simple honesty. Thank you, sir. It means a lot coming from you. The team is gathering in the mess tent for dinner, Reeves said. You should join us. They want to celebrate the successful mission, and they specifically asked if you would be there. Chun stood and brushed dust from her uniform. Lead the way. The mess tent was crowded with personnel from all the units that had participated in the operation. When Chun entered with Reeves, a cheer went up from the SEAL tables. Ortiz stood and gestured dramatically. Make way for Iron Wolf, 28-0, undefeated and undisputed champion. The good-natured ribbing brought laughter from the assembled operators. Chun felt her face flush, but she smiled. This was acceptance at the deepest level. These men were celebrating her not just as a skilled operator, but as one of their own. She sat at the team table between Webb and Rodriguez. Someone had acquired stakes from somewhere, a rare luxury in a forward operating base. The food was good and the company better. Torres, still on limited duty but healing well, raised a water bottle in a toast. To Iron Wolf, who makes the rest of us look like amateurs, and to the team, who had the good sense to trust her when it mattered. Glasses and bottles were raised. Chun felt emotion tighten her throat. She had spent years being underestimated and dismissed. Now she sat surrounded by elite operators who saw her for exactly what she was and valued her because of it, not despite it. The conversation flowed naturally. Stories from the operation. Good-natured arguments about who had the best shot. Speculation about future missions. Chun contributed when she had something to add, but mostly listened, absorbing the camaraderie that came from shared danger and shared success. Rivera and Park joined the table, pulling up chairs. Rivera looked at Chun with undisguised admiration. That displacement you made from the tower to the building, Rivera said. I have practiced that kind of movement in training, but never had to do it under fire. How did you stay so calm? Chun considered the question. Panic is a choice, she replied. Fear is automatic, but how you respond to it is decision. I chose to focus on the tactical problem rather than the emotion. Movement was necessary, so I moved. Park leaned forward. And the shots you made to protect Chief Stone? Those were what, 1,100 meters? Closer to 1,200, Chun corrected. The range was extreme, but I had good data on wind and elevation. The hard part was identifying targets using cover effectively. I had to wait for them to expose themselves. Stone appeared, his arm in a sling, but his spirits clearly improved. He pulled up a chair and inserted himself into conversation. The hard part was making 12 consecutive precision shots while I was bleeding and our assault force was in contact, Stone said. Let us not undersell what you accomplished. He looked around the table. I have worked with some of the best shooters in military. Iron Wolf is in a category by herself. The combination of technical skill and tactical awareness is something I have not seen before. The praise from Stone carried particular weight, given his earlier ego and his current injury. Chun recognized it as genuine and hard-earned. I learned from excellent instructors, Chun said, and I work with operators who push me to be better. None of this happens in isolation. Ortiz laughed. There she goes being humble again. Accept the compliment, Chun. You are exceptional, and everyone at this table knows it. Chun smiled and raised her water bottle. To the team, then. To the operators who make impossible missions possible through skill and trust. The toast was echoed around the table. The conversation shifted to lighter topics. Someone told a story about a training mishap that had become legendary. Another operator described a bizarre encounter with local wildlife during a previous deployment. The tension and intensity of combat gave way to the simple pleasure of being alive and among friends. Later that evening, Chun walked back to her quarters under a sky full of stars. The base was quieter now, most personnel having turned in for the night. She thought about the path that had brought her here. From a young Marine trying to prove herself through to becoming integral to his SEAL team. The journey had been challenging, but worthwhile. Her phone showed a message from her sister back home. Brief and supportive. Heard you did something amazing. Stay safe. Love you. Chen smiled and typed a response. Just doing my job. Miss you too. She entered her quarters and began the ritual of cleaning her rifle. The weapon had performed flawlessly through 28 engagements today. It deserved the same care she gave it after every mission. As she worked, she thought about tomorrow. There would be more planning sessions, more intelligence to review, more missions to prepare for. But tonight she allowed herself to simply appreciate the moment. She was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she was meant to do. The quiet Marine who had been dismissed as support had proven herself in the most demanding circumstances imaginable. Not through boasting or self-promotion, but through consistent excellence when it mattered most. Chen finished cleaning her rifle and secured it in her locker. The locker with her name stenciled on it. Her place on the team was no longer temporary or provisional. It was permanent and earned. She lay down on her rack and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions, new opportunities to prove that the Iron Wolf hunted in silence, but struck with perfect precision. But tonight, she rested, satisfied with the knowledge that she had protected her teammates, accomplished the mission, and lived up to the call sign that defined her. Iron Wolf. Silent, efficient, unstoppable, and finally completely accepted. 6 weeks after the compound operation, Chen stood in formation wearing her dress uniform. The ceremony was being held at the main base with senior officers from Joint Special Operations Command in attendance. Her family had flown in from California. Her sister stood in the crowd with tears already streaming down her face. The Silver Star citation was read aloud. 28 confirmed enemy kills during sustained combat operations. Tactical displacement under direct fire. Precision engagement at extreme ranges that prevented friendly casualties. Exemplary courage under the most demanding circumstances. The words felt surreal to Chun even though she had lived every moment described. A 2-star general pinned the medal to her chest and shook her hand. The gesture was formal, but his words were personal. Staff Sergeant Chun, your actions represent the finest traditions of military service. You have brought great honor to the Marine Corps and to our special operations community. Chun stood at attention and delivered the required response. Thank you, sir. I was honored to serve alongside exceptional operators. The formation was dismissed. Chen's family rushed forward to congratulate her. Her sister wrapped her in a fierce hug that threatened to dislodge the newly pinned medal. I always knew you were special, her sister said, but I had no idea you were doing things like this. Chen hugged her back. Most of what I do is classified, but today they made an exception. Her parents beamed with pride. Her father, a retired police officer, examined the Silver Star with reverent care. He understood what it represented in ways that civilians might not. Valor under fire. Lives saved through skill and courage. The SEAL team stood nearby in their own dress uniforms, having attended the ceremony in force. Torres, now fully recovered and cleared for duty, approached with Reeves. Your family should be very proud, Torres said to Chen's sister. She is the best operator I have worked with in 10 years of doing this job. Chen's sister looked between Torres and Chen with amazement. She saves people's lives? Torres smiled. She saves our lives. Regularly. And she makes it look easy. Reeves joined the conversation and introduced himself to Chen's parents. The lieutenant commander had a natural ability to make people comfortable even in formal circumstances. Within minutes, Chen's family understood that their daughter was not just valued, but essential to the team she served with. The reception following the ceremony was held in the officers' club. Chen moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations from operators she had worked with and senior leaders she had only met in passing. Everyone seemed to know who Iron Wolf was and what she had accomplished. Stone appeared, his shoulder healed, and his own return to full duty scheduled for next week. He had a drink in his good hand and a genuine smile on his face. I heard a rumor, Stone said. JSOC is creating a specialized sniper instructor position. Multi-service advanced training. They want someone who can teach the next generation of precision shooters. Your name came up. Chun felt surprise register on her face. An instructor position would mean leaving the team, leaving the work that had defined her for years. The thought created unexpected conflict. I have not heard anything official, Chun replied carefully. You will, Stone said. And for what it is worth, I think you should take it. You have proven everything there is to prove in combat. Teaching others to reach your level would multiply your impact exponentially. Chun had not considered it in those terms. Her focus had always been on the next mission, the next target, the next opportunity to protect her teammates. But Stone had a point. How many lives could be saved if she helped create 50 snipers who operated at even 70% of her capability? Something to think about, Chun acknowledged. The party continued for hours. Stories were told and retold, each one slightly embellished, but rooted in genuine shared experience. Chun found herself laughing at Ortiz's description of the first mission when everyone had assumed she was just carrying extra batteries. We thought you were there to change radio batteries and pack extra water, Ortiz said to the assembled crowd. Turns out she was there to drop 14 guys in 10 minutes and save our entire operation. Webb raises glass to assumptions and the people who prove them wrong. The toast was drunk with enthusiasm. Chun felt the warmth of genuine affection from these men who had become her brothers. They had tested her through fire and found her worthy. That validation meant more than any medal. As the evening wound down, Reeves found Chun on the club balcony, looking out at the base. He joined her at the railing, both of them enjoying the quiet after hours of noise. Stone told you about the instructor position, Reeves said. It was not a question. Chun nodded. He thinks I should take it. Reeves was quiet for a moment. What do you think? Chun considered her answer carefully. Part of me wants to stay with the team. Keep doing the work. But another part recognizes that I have been doing this for years, and maybe it is time to pass on what I have learned. Reeves turned to face her. You have earned the right to choose your next step, whether that is staying with us, taking the instructor position, or doing something else entirely. JSOC will support whatever you decide. He paused before continuing. But I will tell you this. The team will miss you if you go. You have become integral to how we operate. Finding someone to fill your role will be nearly impossible. Chun smiled. Torres is back to full duty. Stone will be cleared next week. You will have 2 exceptional snipers without me. True, Reeves agreed. But they are not you, and the team knows it. The weight of the decision settled on Chun's shoulders. Stay with the team and continue the work she loved. Or take the instructor position and help create the next generation of operators who might save even more lives. I need time to think about it, Chun said. Reeves nodded. Take all the time you need. The offer will be there when you are ready. The next morning, Chun returned to the team room. Her family had departed on an early flight, satisfied that their daughter was safe and valued. The base had returned to its normal operational tempo. Life continued. Torres was at the planning table reviewing intelligence for an upcoming mission. He looked up when Chun entered. Want to help me work through this one? Torres asked. 2 targets, compound defense, long-range engagement required. Right in your wheelhouse. Chun pulled up a chair and studied the imagery. The familiar process of tactical planning felt comfortable. This was where she belonged. Solving problems, protecting teammates, executing missions that made a difference. But as she worked through the details with Torres, a thought occurred to her. How many young snipers were struggling to reach their potential because they lacked the advanced training she had received? How many missions were failing because precision capability was not available? How many lives could be saved if she shared what she knew? The instructor position would not be abandonment of the fight. It would be multiplication of her impact. Every student she trained would go on to protect their own teams. The effect would compound over years and across conflicts. Chun made her decision. That afternoon, she requested a meeting with Reeves. The lieutenant commander received her in his office with the relaxed professionalism that characterized their relationship. I have decided to accept the instructor position, Chun said without preamble. If the offer is still available. Reeves showed no surprise. He had probably anticipated this decision from the moment Stone mentioned it. It is available, he confirmed. When do you want to start? Chun thought about the timeline. After this next rotation, give me 3 more months with the team to help transition Torres and Stone into the primary sniper roles. Then I will move to the instructor position. Reeves extended his hand. Congratulations. You're going to change a lot of lives in that role. Chen shook his hand. Thank you for everything you have done for me. This team gave me the opportunity to prove what I could accomplish. I will not forget that. The transition period passed quickly. Chun ran 3 more missions with the team, each one successful and each one demonstrating the capability she would be teaching others to develop. Torres and Stone worked together seamlessly, their combined experience providing the team with exceptional precision capability. On her final day with SEAL Team 3, the team held a small ceremony in the team room. Reeves presented her with a plaque commemorating her service. The inscription was simple but meaningful. Staff Sergeant Maya Chun, Iron Wolf. SEAL Team 3, 2025-2026. 63 confirmed combat kills. 0 missions failed. The standard all snipers aspire to reach. Chun accepted the plaque with genuine emotion. She looked around the room at faces that had become family. Torres, Ortiz, Webb, Rodriguez, Stone, Rivera, Park, each one an exceptional warrior. Each one someone she had fought beside and would trust with her life. This team took a chance on a Marine who nobody expected much from. Chun said, "You gave me the opportunity to prove myself and the support to succeed. Everything I accomplished here was possible because you trusted me." She paused to collect her thoughts. "Now, I'm going to take everything this team taught me and pass it on to the next generation. When you run missions 5 years from now and work with snipers who seem unusually competent, remember that they might be my students. That will be my legacy from this time." The room was silent for a moment. Then Ortiz started clapping. The applause spread until everyone was standing and recognizing Chen's contribution to their success and survival. Reeves stepped forward. "Iron Wolf will always have a home with this team. When you finish your instructor tour, if you want to come back, we will be here." Chen nodded, not trusting herself to speak without emotion showing through. The next morning, she packed her gear and prepared to leave for her new assignment. The rifle that had served her through dozens of missions was cleaned and secured in its case. Her equipment was staged for transport. Her locker in the team room would be reassigned to the next operator who earned a place on the team. Before she departed, Chun took one last walk around the base. She visited the range where she had practiced at extreme distances, the equipment bay where she had prepared for missions, the briefing room where she had contributed to tactical planning. Each location held memories of growth and achievement. As her transport vehicle arrived, the team assembled to see her off. No formal ceremony, just brothers saying goodbye to someone who had fought beside them. Torres shook her hand. Ortiz gave her a bear hug. Webb wished her luck with genuine warmth. Reeves simply nodded, understanding passing between them without words. Chun climbed into the vehicle and looked back one final time. These men had seen past assumptions and recognized her for who she truly was. They had given her the opportunity to excel and the support to reach her potential. That gift was precious, and she would honor it by doing the same for others. If you enjoyed this story, drop a comment about your favorite moment or character, or share if you have witnessed someone reveal unexpected capabilities in your own life. The vehicle pulled away from the base. Chen watched through the window until the team disappeared from view. Then she turned forward, ready for the next chapter. Teaching, mentoring, creating the next generation of Iron Wolves who would hunt in silence and strike with precision. Her combat days were not over. They were simply evolving. And somewhere, a young sniper struggling to find their potential would benefit from everything Maya Chun had learned. That was legacy. That was purpose. That was how excellence multiplied across generations. Iron Wolf was leaving the team, but the standard she had set would endure.